Ancient cities were not built on random plots of land. They were founded on ground believed to be charged with divine power. This is a journey to 35 of the most sacred sites in human history. By the end, you will understand how faith and belief literally shaped the map of our world. We will see a temple complex so old it rewrote history, and a city designed as a perfect model of the universe. What force compels people to build their greatest achievements on hallowed earth? The story begins not with a city, but with a call to gather. In the dry, rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, a hilltop known as Göbekli Tepe holds a secret that shattered our understanding of human history. For over 11,000 years, this place has waited. That is a staggering number. It means these stones were raised 6,000 years before Stonehenge and a full 7 millennia before the Great Pyramid of Giza. What you find here is not a fortress or a palace. There are no homes, no granaries, no signs of a permanent settlement. Instead, you find circles, great rings of massive, T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing more than 10 tons, hauled and erected by a people we thought were simple hunter-gatherers. Each pillar is a monument carved with a menagerie of ancient power: foxes, snakes, scorpions, and birds of prey frozen in the stone. This was not a place to live. It was a place to believe. The mystery of Göbekli Tepe is profound. For generations, scholars told a simple story. First, humans learned to farm and build stable communities. Then, with the leisure and resources that agriculture provided, they had time to develop complex religion and build temples. Göbekli Tepe turns that story completely on its head. Here on this sacred hilltop, it appears that the temple came first. The sheer scale of the work, the coordination required to cut, move, and erect these monoliths, suggests a level of social organization we never attributed to people of that era. It forces a revolutionary question. What if it was not farming that created religion, but a shared, compelling faith that brought people together and compelled them to organize, to cooperate on a grand scale? What if the need to build on sacred ground was the very spark that ignited civilization? This hill was chosen with clear intent. It dominates the landscape, a natural podium visible for miles. To stand there is to feel a connection, a deliberate link between the earth below and the vast sky above. The builders saw this ridge not just as high ground, but as a thin place, a nexus where the world of humans could touch the realm of the spirits and the gods. They invested unimaginable effort to mark that spot, to make the invisible connection visible and permanent. Göbekli Tepe stands as a testament to a fundamental human impulse. Before we built cities to live in, we built sacred spaces to meet our gods, and in doing so, we may have accidentally built the very blueprint for society itself. That sacred impulse to build where heaven meets earth did not fade with the stone circles of Göbekli Tepe. It intensified, and it found one of its most powerful and enduring expressions in a city whose very name echoes through millennia. Jerusalem, more than any other place on this list, this city embodies the concept of sacred ground, layered not by one faith but by three. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all trace their deepest spiritual roots to this same cluster of ancient hills. To walk its narrow streets is to walk through a living, breathing palimpsest of faith, where every stone seems to whisper a different prayer. The heart of this sacred geography, the focal point that draws all three traditions, is a plateau known as the Temple Mount. For Jews, this is the mountain where Abraham prepared to sacrifice his son Isaac in an ultimate test of faith. It is the site where King Solomon built the first temple, a magnificent structure said to house the very presence of God. After its destruction, a second temple rose in its place, the center of Jewish worship and pilgrimage. Today, the last remaining retaining wall of that second temple complex, the Western Wall, stands as Judaism's most sacred site. People from across the globe come to press their hands and foreheads against its massive, sun-warmed stones, believing the holiness of that ancient ground still resonates there. For Muslims, this same elevated platform is called Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary. It is the third holiest site in Islam, believed to be the place from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the night journey. Two stunning structures crown this space: the Golden Dome of the Rock, its brilliant tilework and iconic shape defining the Jerusalem skyline, and the silver-domed Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the earliest places of Islamic worship. For Christians, Jerusalem is the city of the crucifixion and resurrection. The path Jesus walked, the hill where he was crucified, and the tomb from which he rose are all contained within its walls, making the Church of the Holy Sepulchre a pilgrimage destination of unparalleled significance. So here, on this one piece of elevated land, you have a convergence of belief so dense it has shaped global history. This is the ultimate axis mundi, a divine center of the world. The city's layout, its very identity, is a testament to this status. Its history is written in conflict and devotion, a relentless tug of war over a place considered too holy for any one people to claim exclusively. The stones of Jerusalem are not just building materials, they are considered vessels holding the weight of countless prayers, vows, and aspirations across 3,000 years. To stand in the shadow of the Western Wall or to gaze upon the Dome of the Rock is to feel the immense gravitational pull of sacred geography. It demonstrates how a location, deemed a meeting point between the human and the divine, can become the most coveted, fought over, and cherished real estate on the planet. The profound longing for sacred ground is not always about reaching upward toward the heavens. Sometimes it is about descending to the water's edge, to a place where the boundary between life and death is believed to dissolve. From the contested heights of Jerusalem, we journey to a city that embodies a different kind of sacred flow, one of the oldest living cities on earth. Varanasi, also known as Kashi, the luminous city, rises from the western banks of the Ganges River in northern India. For over 3,000 years, this metropolis has pulsed with a singular, unwavering purpose. It is not merely a city where people live, it is a city where people come to truly live and ultimately to die. According to Hindu tradition, Varanasi was founded by none other than Lord Shiva, the god of destruction and transformation. He is said to have established this city as his earthly abode, infusing every grain of sand and every stone with his divine essence. This makes the ground of Varanasi itself sacred, but its power is magnified 1,000-fold by the river that flows past it. The Ganges is not just a river here, it is a goddess, Ganga Ma, Mother Ganges. Her waters are considered a liquid form of divinity, possessing the power to purify absolutely anything. To bathe in her at Varanasi, especially at dawn, is to perform an act of spiritual cleansing believed to wash away the sins of a lifetime. This daily ritual draws millions of pilgrims each year who stand waist-deep in the flowing current, offering prayers as the sun breaks over the horizon. But the relationship with the sacred here goes even deeper than cleansing. Varanasi is considered the most auspicious place for a Hindu to die. The belief is profound: if you breathe your last in Kashi and your ashes are committed to the Ganges here, you can attain moksha. This is liberation, freedom from the endless cycle of death and rebirth. It is the ultimate spiritual goal. This belief shapes the entire physical and emotional landscape of the city. The famous Ghats, the long series of stepped stone embankments that lead down to the river, are not just for bathing, they are a theater for the full human journey. At some Ghats, you see the vibrant chaos of life: children playing, priests performing ceremonies, vendors selling marigold flowers. At others, known as the burning Ghats, the air carries the scent of sandalwood and smoke as funeral pyres burn day and night, a solemn and public-facing process of returning a soul to the elements. The city's labyrinthine lanes, ancient temples, and bustling markets all orient themselves toward this central, sacred artery, the Ganges. Every alley seems to lead to the water, every prayer eventually flows toward it. To walk through Varanasi is to witness a city that has organized its entire existence, its architecture, its economy, its very rhythm around a spiritual conviction. It is a place where the sacred is not a historical artifact, but a daily, tangible, flowing reality. Here, the Axis Mundi is not a mountain or a temple mount, but a river, a continuous, moving connection between the mortal world and the eternal. From the flowing, life-giving waters of the Ganges, we ascend to a realm where the sacred is carved from stone and sky. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of the Peruvian Andes, clinging to a ridge between two jagged summits, sits a city that seems to defy both gravity and time. Machu Picchu. This is not a city built on sacred ground. It is a city that became sacred ground, an entire mountaintop transformed into a breathtaking act of devotion. For centuries, it lay hidden from the outside world, known only to local Quechua people, until its dramatic rediscovery in the early 20th century. What they found was not a fortress or a conventional capital, but something far more profound, a sanctuary designed as a perfect conversation between humanity, the earth, and the cosmos. The Incas, master stoneworkers and visionary engineers, did not simply build on this ridge, they became partners with it. Every structure, every terrace, every stairway was crafted with an almost reverential precision. The iconic agricultural terraces that cascade down the mountainsides are not just practical feats of farming, they are artistic contours that mirror the natural lines of the peaks themselves. It is as if the city is growing organically from the mountain, a seamless extension of the landscape rather than an intrusion upon it. This was a core tenet of the Inca worldview, the concept of harmony with the Apus, the powerful mountain spirits believed to govern the weather and protect the people. By shaping their city to echo the Apus, the builders were paying respect, ensuring their presence was in alignment, not in opposition. But the sacred engineering of Machu Picchu reaches beyond the earthly to the celestial. The Incas were meticulous astronomers, and their city is a stone calendar oriented to the heavens. Key buildings, like the Temple of the Sun, are positioned with incredible accuracy to capture the first rays of the sun during the June solstice, illuminating a sacred stone within. Windows and doorways frame specific astronomical events, turning architecture into a tool for marking time and worship. The most striking example of this is the Intihuatana stone. This elegantly carved granite pillar, whose name translates to the hitching post of the sun, served as a sophisticated astronomical clock and a focal point for ritual. During the equinoxes, the sun would sit directly above the pillar, casting no shadow, a moment believed to symbolically tether the sun to the earth, ensuring its return and the continuity of life. This leads us to the central mystery of Machu Picchu, its purpose. While it likely served as a luxurious royal estate for Emperor Pachacuti, a retreat from the bustle of the capital at Cusco, its remote location and dense concentration of temples suggest a deeper function. It was almost certainly a major religious center, a secluded university for Inca nobility and priests to study astronomy, perform ceremonies, and connect with the spiritual forces of the mountains and the sky. The journey to reach it was itself a pilgrimage, a physical and spiritual ascent. To walk its silent plazas, to touch stones fitted together without mortar so tightly a blade cannot slip between them, is to feel the presence of a civilization that saw no separation between the practical and the sacred. Every wall, every view, every aligned stone was a prayer made permanent, a declaration that humanity's greatest work is to honor the world it inhabits. Here, the Axis Mundi is not a single point, but an entire engineered landscape, a mountain peak transformed into a bridge between the earth and the stars. The precision of Machu Picchu reveals a civilization in intimate dialogue with the cosmos, yet its story is one we can trace. In the highlands of central Mexico lies a city whose origins are so ancient, so shrouded in silence, that even its true name is lost to us. Teotihuacan, the name we use today, was given by the Aztecs centuries after its collapse, and it means the place where the gods were created. For the Aztecs, gazing upon the ruins of this abandoned metropolis, it was unthinkable that mere humans could have built such a place. They believed only deities could have raised these monumental pyramids, that this was the sacred ground where the sun and moon were first born from sacrificial fire. The reality is perhaps even more compelling. Teotihuacan was one of the largest cities in the entire ancient world, a thriving metropolis that, at its peak around the year 500, was home to over 100,000 people. And we have no idea who they were, the language they spoke, the ethnic group they belonged to, the name of a single king or ruler. All of it vanished without a written record we can decipher. The city itself is the only text we have, and it is written in stone, water, and celestial alignment. Your journey into its heart begins on the Avenue of the Dead. This central artery, over 2 miles long and 100 feet wide, runs straight as an arrow through the city's core. Flanking it are the ruins of vast residential compounds and smaller temple platforms, but your eyes are drawn irresistibly forward, pulled toward 2 colossal forms that dominate the horizon. At the northern terminus sits the Pyramid of the Moon, its shape mirroring the contour of the sacred mountain Cerro Gordo behind it. But it is the structure midway along the avenue that commands awe, the Pyramid of the Sun. This is not merely a building, it is an artificial mountain. Constructed from an estimated 3 million tons of stone and earth, it is one of the largest pyramids on the planet. To climb its steep steps is to undertake a physical and symbolic ascent, a reenactment of a foundational myth. For the people of Teotihuacan, pyramids were not tombs as they were in Egypt. They were sacred mountains. In Mesoamerican belief, mountains were hollow. They were the source of life-giving water, the home of ancestors, and the portals to the underworld. By building these immense pyramids, the city's unknown architects were replicating the mythic landscape of creation itself. They were constructing a permanent, tangible model of their universe right here on the plain. This was not just symbolism, it was sacred engineering with a profound purpose. The entire city grid is a massive cosmological clock. The Avenue of the Dead is aligned precisely 15.5 degrees east of true north. This orientation is not random. Scholars believe it was set to track the Pleiades star cluster as it passed directly overhead, an event of immense agricultural and ritual significance. Furthermore, from the summit of the Pyramid of the Sun, an observer on the day it was designed to mark would see the sun set directly over the peak of Cerro Gordo on a key date in the solar cycle. The city is a machine for tracking time and honoring the gods who governed it. And that brings us to the core belief, the spiritual fuel that drove this unimaginable construction project. Teotihuacan was believed to be the very site of creation. According to a myth later recorded by the Aztecs but likely originating here, the gods gathered at Teotihuacan in primordial darkness to create the sun and moon. They built a great fire, and 2 deities sacrificed themselves by leaping into the flames, one emerging as the sun, the other as the moon. This act of divine sacrifice set the cosmos in motion. Therefore, to stand in Teotihuacan was to stand at the center of everything, at the point where time began. Every ceremony performed on those pyramids, every procession down the Avenue of the Dead, was an act of cosmic maintenance, a ritual to ensure the sun would continue its journey and the world would endure. The city's silent, towering geometry is a permanent prayer, a belief in stone that the most sacred ground of all is the place where the world was born. The silence of Teotihuacan speaks of a universe born from sacrifice, a cosmos meticulously mapped in stone. But this desire to build a model of creation, to make the sacred blueprint visible on Earth, found another breathtaking expression halfway across the world. In the dense jungles of Cambodia, a civilization undertook an engineering project of almost unimaginable ambition. They did not just build a city on sacred ground, they sculpted an entire landscape to become a perfect, functioning replica of the Hindu cosmos. This is Angkor, the vast capital of the Khmer Empire, and its masterpiece, Angkor Wat. To understand Angkor, you must first understand the spiritual vision that drove it. In Hindu and Buddhist cosmology, there exists a sacred mountain, Mount Meru. This is not just any mountain, it is the axis of the entire universe, the home of the gods, and the center of all physical and spiritual realms. The kings of the Khmer Empire, seen as divine rulers or Devarajas, god kings, had one paramount duty: to maintain harmony between their kingdom and the cosmic order. They believed the best way to do this was to literally build that cosmic order on earth. Angkor was not a city that happened to have a large temple. Angkor was a temple that expanded into a city, a living, breathing mandala of stone and water. The crown jewel of this divine project is Angkor Wat. From above, its true genius becomes clear. The entire complex is a precise architectural diagram. The towering central spires represent the peaks of Mount Meru. The concentric galleries and courtyards are the mountain's lower ranges, and surrounding it all is a massive, rectangular moat over 600 feet wide. This is not a defensive structure, it is a symbol of the cosmic ocean that encircles the world in myth. So, when a pilgrim approached Angkor Wat, they were not just walking toward a temple. They were symbolically crossing the primordial waters, journeying toward the center of creation itself. The scale is humbling. It is the largest religious monument ever constructed, using more stone than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Every surface tells a story, with miles of intricate bas-reliefs depicting Hindu epics, celestial dancers, and the king's own military victories, blending history and myth into one continuous sacred narrative. But Angkor Wat was just the spiritual heart. The genius of the Khmer extended far beyond its walls. The entire urban complex of Angkor, covering an area nearly the size of modern-day Los Angeles, was part of the sacred machine. The Khmer were master hydrologists. They transformed the landscape with an elaborate network of canals, reservoirs called barrages, and sophisticated irrigation systems. These were not merely practical feats for rice farming, though they fed a population of perhaps 1 million people. They were a hydraulic reenactment of the cosmic cycle. The giant barrages, immense artificial lakes, were seen as the earthly counterparts to the oceans surrounding Mount Meru. The water's controlled movement from reservoir to field mirrored the celestial order, bringing fertility and literally channeling the sacred essence of the cosmic ocean into the soil of the kingdom. Scattered throughout this engineered landscape are other temple mountains, like the enigmatic Bayon with its giant stone faces gazing serenely in all directions. Each served as a smaller axis mundi, anchoring the sacred geography. The city's very layout was a spiritual statement. Roads and canals often aligned to cardinal points or key astronomical directions, weaving the urban fabric into the cosmic grid. The king's role was to be the chief priest of this vast temple city. By commissioning these structures and managing the life-giving water, he demonstrated his divine mandate. His prosperity was the kingdom's prosperity. The orderly flow of water mirrored the orderly flow of cosmic power, and the stability of the stones mirrored the stability of the universe. Angkor was the ultimate act of sacred mimicry, a belief that by building heaven on earth, you could compel heaven to bless the earth. For centuries, this symbiosis of spiritual vision and engineering genius worked, creating one of the most magnificent cities the world has ever seen. It stands as a testament to the human impulse to not just find sacred ground, but to painstakingly construct it, stone by stone, canal by canal, until the line between the city and the cosmos beautifully, deliberately disappears. Yet the blueprint of heaven is not always built to last 1,000 years. Sometimes the sacred connection is a fragile, living thing, a whisper from the earth itself that demands constant interpretation. From the monumental certainty of Angkor, we travel to a place where the divine spoke through a crack in the ground. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus in Greece, overlooking a valley of olive trees that stretches to the sea, lies Delphi. The Greeks called it the Omphalos, the navel of the world. This was not a city of residence, but a city of revelation, the beating spiritual heart of the ancient Greek world for centuries. Its power stemmed from a single, mysterious source. According to myth, Zeus released two eagles from opposite ends of the earth, and they met at this very spot, marking it as the center of all things. But the practical reason for its sacred status was far more tangible. Here, from a deep chasm in the rock, rose strange, intoxicating vapors. The ancients believed these fumes were the breath of Gaia, the earth goddess herself. Over this sacred cleft, they built a temple to Apollo, god of prophecy, light, and order, and inside that temple sat the Pythia, the oracle. She was not a queen or a priestess in the usual sense. She was a vessel, often a local woman of humble origins, chosen to serve as the medium between gods and mortals. On appointed days, after elaborate purification rituals, she would descend into the temple's inner chamber, sit on a tripod stool over the fissure, and inhale the rising vapors. Entering a trance-like state, she would then deliver the words of Apollo. Her utterances were not clear commands. They were riddles, poetic and notoriously ambiguous, spoken in a frenzied voice that male priests would then translate into verse for the supplicant. This was the genius and the danger of Delphi. A king could not simply ask, "Should I go to war?" and receive a simple yes or no. He might receive a prophecy like, "You will go and return not, or you will destroy a great kingdom." The interpretation was everything. The kingdom destroyed could be the enemy's, or it could be his own. This ambiguity placed immense power in the hands of the priests and by extension made Delphi the ultimate political nerve center of the ancient world. No major colony was founded, no war declared, no significant law passed by any Greek city-state without first sending envoys and lavish gifts to consult the oracle. The sacred way winding up the mountainside was lined with treasure houses, built by city-states like Athens, Sparta, and Thebes to store their offerings and showcase their wealth and piety. It was a spiritual arms race played out in marble and gold. To have your question answered favorably was to have divine sanction for your actions. The oracle's influence wove itself into the fabric of history. It was said the Pythia told Socrates he was the wisest man in Greece, a declaration that set him on his philosophical journey. She reportedly told King Croesus of Lydia that if he attacked Persia, he would destroy a great empire. He did, it was his own. Delphi's sacred geography was a perfect synthesis of myth and landscape. The towering cliffs of the Phaedriades, the Castalian spring for ritual cleansing, the breathtaking vista that made you feel on top of the world, all conspired to create an atmosphere of awe and otherworldliness. The Omphalos stone, a carved dome kept in the temple, physically marked the spot as the world's center. But the true axis here was not a mountain or a pyramid. It was a human voice altered by the earth's breath, channeling a god's will. It was a sacred system built not on permanence but on mystery, on the terrifying and thrilling idea that the divine could speak directly into human affairs, if only you were brave enough to ask and wise enough to understand the answer. But the voice of the oracle spoke to a world of city-states and heroes. For a vision of sacred power on an imperial scale, we must travel to the dusty plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Here rose a city whose name alone became synonymous with grandeur, wealth, and divine ambition. Babylon. More than just a capital, it was a theological statement in mudbrick and glazed tile, a city engineered to be the literal dwelling place of a god and the center of a cosmic story. Its legendary walls, its towering ziggurat, and its breathtaking gates were all designed with one overwhelming purpose: to demonstrate that heaven's order was mirrored perfectly in the king's rule. The spiritual engine of Babylon was the god Marduk. He was not just a patron deity, he was the supreme king of the gods, the champion who had defeated the primordial chaos monster Tiamat to create the world. And Babylon was his earthly home. This belief was made spectacularly visible each year during the Akitu festival, the New Year celebration. This was not merely a party, it was a city-wide ritual drama of cosmic importance. The statue of Marduk would be paraded from his temple through the city streets, out the grand gates, and to a special festival house. This journey reenacted his mythical battle and victory. The king would enter the temple of Marduk, and in a humbling act, the high priest would slap the monarch's face and pull his ears, making him kneel before the god to swear that he had not neglected his divine duties. Only after this symbolic renewal of the king's mandate, this re-establishment of the bond between heaven and earth, could the statue return to its sanctuary. The entire city participated in this ritual, its social order and agricultural fortune for the coming year depending on its correct performance. Babylon itself was the stage for this divine drama. At the physical heart of this sacred stage stood the Etemenanki, the ziggurat whose name means the foundation of heaven and earth. This massive, stepped pyramid temple was dedicated to Marduk. It rose in tiered levels, a colossal stairway meant to bridge the gap between the human realm and the divine. Its awe-inspiring scale and ambition etched it into memory so powerfully that scholars believe it became the origin of the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, a human attempt to build a stairway to heaven that challenged divine authority. Whether seen as a pious monument or an act of hubris, its message was clear: Babylon was the point of connection, and to enter this divine city, you passed through a gate that was itself a piece of heaven brought to earth. The Ishtar Gate was not merely an entrance, it was a spiritual threshold. Covered in lustrous blue glazed bricks, it was adorned with rows of alternating bas-reliefs, magnificent bulls, and a creature called the Mashhashu, a serpent dragon sacred to Marduk. The effect was overwhelming, a shimmering, celestial blue wall glowing under the Mesopotamian sun, guarded by mythic beasts. Passing through it, you were leaving the ordinary world and entering the domain of the God-King. This sacred atmosphere extended to the city's very fabric. The inner walls of the processional way leading to the gate were lined with more glazed bricks, this time depicting lions, the symbol of the goddess Ishtar. Every brick was a prayer, every wall a continuous frieze of divine protection and power. Even one of its most famous wonders, the Hanging Gardens, fits into this cosmology of sacred kingship. Though their exact location and existence are debated, ancient accounts describe them as a breathtaking artificial mountain of terraced gardens, a green, watered paradise built by King Nebuchadnezzar II. If they existed, they were not just a romantic gift. In the flat, arid landscape of Mesopotamia, a verdant, elevated garden was a symbol of royal power over nature, a recreation of the mythical, fertile mountain of the gods. It was a king demonstrating his ability to bring life and order just as Marduk had. From its rituals to its architecture, Babylon was a complete system. The king was Marduk's earthly steward, the ziggurat was his staircase, the gates were his guardians, and the city's laws, like the famous Code of Hammurabi inscribed on stone for all to see, were presented as gifts from the gods. The entire metropolis was a conscious, breathtaking attempt to build a permanent axis mundi, to anchor the stable, divine order of the cosmos into the very soil of human empire. It proclaimed that here, in this city of blue gates and towering temples, heaven and earth were in perfect, majestic alignment. The imperial ambition of Babylon sought to build heaven on the plains, but some believe heaven already has a permanent address high upon the roof of the world. At an altitude of over 12,000 feet, in a valley surrounded by snow-capped peaks, lies Lhasa. Its name translates simply to the place of the gods. This is not a metaphor. For over 1,000 years, Tibetan Buddhists have believed this city in the clouds to be a pure land, a realm of enlightened beings made manifest on earth. Its entire geography is a sacred map, and every stone tells a story of devotion. The focal point, visible from almost anywhere in the valley, is an architectural marvel that seems to grow directly from the Red Hill itself, the Potala Palace. This immense 13-story fortress of white and red walls with its 1,000 windows was the winter residence of the Dalai Lamas, the spiritual leaders of Tibetan Buddhism. It is not merely a palace, it is a library, a monastery, a mausoleum, and a living symbol of the fusion of spiritual and temporal authority. To climb its long, sloping stairways is to ascend through layers of sacred history, past chapels glittering with gold and murals depicting countless deities, each room a chapter in a profound spiritual lineage. Yet the true, beating heart of Lhasa is not the palace on the hill, but a temple in the bustling old city. The Jokhang Temple is considered the most sacred site in all of Tibet. Its power is anchored by a single, revered object, the Jao Shakyamuni statue. This ancient image of the Buddha as a young prince is believed to have been blessed by the historical Buddha himself, making it not a representation but a living embodiment of his presence. For pilgrims, the ultimate goal of a journey that may have taken months or years on foot, often involving full-body prostrations for hundreds of miles, is to finally stand before the Jao. The air inside the temple is thick with the scent of butter lamps and murmured prayers, a palpable concentration of faith accumulated over centuries. This devotion physically shapes the city's rhythm. Encircling the Jokhang is the Barker, a sacred circumambulation path. Pilgrims and locals move in a continuous, clockwise flow around the temple, spinning handheld prayer wheels, their murmurs creating a low, resonant hum. This ritual circuit, or kora, is an act of meditation in motion, symbolizing the path to enlightenment. Larger circuits encompass the entire city, and the most ambitious encircle the entire region, mapping faith directly onto the landscape. Lhasa was not built here for strategic or economic reasons. This high valley was chosen because it was seen as spiritually potent, a basin of mystical energy. The geography itself is part of the scripture. The surrounding mountains are not just barriers, they are protectors, and the Kyichu River flowing through it is a sacred artery. Every element conspires to make Lhasa feel like a separate realm, a divine blueprint realized in wood, stone, and unwavering belief. It is a city where the sacred is the infrastructure, where every step is a prayer, and the ground itself is understood to be a gateway. But the divine blueprint of Lhasa was a sanctuary for the living. In the jungles of the Yucatan, another civilization built its sacred city around a gateway to the underworld. Chichen Itza, the great Maya metropolis, is a masterpiece of sacred engineering, a place where time itself was measured in stone and shadow, and where the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the gods was negotiated with terrifying precision. At its heart stands El Castillo, the Temple of Kukulkan. This magnificent stepped pyramid is far more than a monument. It is a colossal, functioning calendar. Its 4 stairways each have 91 steps. Add the single step of the temple platform at the top, and you get 365, the solar year. Each of its 9 terraced levels is divided by a staircase, creating 18 sections, mirroring the 18 months of the Maya calendar. But the true magic happens not in its count, but in its play of light. The Maya architects aligned the pyramid with such celestial accuracy that during the spring and autumn equinoxes, a breathtaking phenomenon occurs. As the sun sets, the corner of the structure casts a series of triangular shadows along the balustrade of the northern staircase. These interlocking shapes of light and dark form the undulating body of a giant serpent, appearing to slither down from the temple summit to meet its stone head at the base. This is the descent of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god, a deity of creation, wind, and wisdom. For the gathered thousands, this was not an illusion, it was a manifestation. The god was physically arriving, descending from the heavens to bless the earth, to renew the agricultural cycle, and to affirm the cosmic order. The entire city was designed to facilitate this conversation with the cosmos. Just to the north lies the Great Ball Court, the largest and most impressive of its kind ever discovered. The game played here was not a sport in our modern sense. It was a profound ritual, often a matter of life and death. The court itself is a symbolic landscape representing the Maya creation story where heroic twins defeated the lords of the underworld in a bowl game. The stone rings set high on the walls were not just goals, they were portals. Scholars believe the game reenacted the movement of celestial bodies, perhaps the sun passing through the underworld at night. The outcome held cosmic significance, and it is widely thought that the captain of the winning team, or sometimes the losing captain, would be sacrificed, his death ensuring the sun would rise again and the world would continue. This connection to sacrifice leads to one of the city's most potent and chilling sacred sites, the sacred cenote. This is a vast natural sinkhole, a circular well of deep green water that provided the city with its name, Chichen Itza, meaning at the mouth of the well of the Itza. For the Maya, cenotes were not just water sources, they were portals to Xibalba, the watery underworld. The sacred cenote was a place of direct communication with the gods. Archaeologists dredging its depths have found a grim testament to this belief: skeletons of men, women, and children, along with a wealth of jade, gold, and other precious offerings. These were not careless discards, they were gifts and messengers sent into the realm of the rain god Chok to plead for water, for fertility, for favor. The city's observatory, known as El Caracol for its spiral staircase, further cements this identity. Its unusual circular structure, with narrow windows aligned to the movements of Venus, shows how the Maya tracked the planet's cycles with obsessive detail. Venus was associated with war, and its positions dictated the timing of military campaigns and royal ceremonies. From the serpent shadow on the pyramid to the ball game's deadly conclusion, from the offerings cast into the dark water to the silent tracking of a star, every aspect of Chichen Itza was a gear in a single, immense sacred machine. The city was a clock, a calendar, and a church, all built to measure divine time and plead for divine grace. The sacred calculations of Chichen Itza measured a cosmos governed by cycles and sacrifice. But what happens when a city believes its destiny is not just to honor the gods, but to rule the world in their name? The answer lies in 7 hills rising from the banks of the Tiber River. Rome did not simply emerge, it was willed into being by a story so powerful it became history. Its foundation myth is a sacred drama. Twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, sons of the war god Mars, are abandoned as infants, nursed by a she-wolf and raised by a shepherd. As adults, they decide to found a city but quarrel over its location. Romulus kills Remus and becomes the first king, tracing a sacred boundary with a plow. From this act of fratricide and divine favor, the Eternal City was born. This was not just a legend for the Romans, it was a theological cornerstone. It gave them a divine lineage, a sense of chosen destiny, and a sacred geography that structured their entire world. The city's spiritual and political power was concentrated on 3 of its famous hills. The Capitoline Hill was the religious axis mundi, crowned by the immense temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the best and greatest. This temple was not just a building, it was a statement to the gods and to all visitors. Here, Jupiter, alongside his wife Juno and daughter Minerva, formed the Capitoline Triad, the supreme protectors of Rome. A Roman general celebrating a triumph would process through the city, climb this hill, and offer sacrifices in this temple, completing his victory as a sacred contract between the state and the divine. Just south lay the Palatine Hill. According to myth, this was where Romulus founded his settlement. In time, it became the exclusive residence of emperors, a physical manifestation of power literally built upon the sacred ground of the founder. To live on the Palatine was to inhabit the origin story itself, and connecting these hills was the valley that pulsed with the city's daily life, the Roman Forum. This was not merely a marketplace or a civic square. It was the beating heart of the Republic and later the Empire, a dense cluster of temples, law courts, and speaking platforms. Every political speech, every legal case, every public announcement took place under the gaze of the gods, whose temples lined the edges. The Senate House stood in the shadow of the Temple of Concord, emphasizing that political harmony was a divine gift. The sacred and the political were inseparable, woven into the same urban fabric. This fusion of faith and function reached its architectural zenith with the Pantheon. Originally built as a temple to all gods, its genius is a mystery that still takes your breath away. You step through massive bronze doors into a vast circular room, and your eyes are pulled upward to the oculus, a single, perfect opening 30 feet across at the very center of the dome. It is the only source of light. A beam of sunlight streams in, moving across the marble floor like a celestial clock, illuminating different niches that once held statues of the gods. On rainy days, water falls through the opening and drains away through cleverly designed holes in the floor. The dome itself is a masterpiece of sacred engineering, a concrete hemisphere that seems to float, symbolizing the vault of heaven itself. To stand inside is to feel you are standing at the center of a man-made cosmos, directly beneath the eye of the gods. But perhaps the most profound concept was invisible. The Romans believed the city itself was a sacred entity protected by a spiritual force called the pomerium. This was not just a city wall, it was a religious boundary, a strip of consecrated land traced by Romulus with his plow, marking where the city ended and the ordinary world began. Within the pomerium, the rules changed. No armies could march, no tombs could be built, and only certain gods could be worshipped. It was a zone of divine peace and order. To cross this line was to move from the profane to the sacred, from chaos to civilization. This meant Rome was not just a city with temples. The entire urban space within that line was itself a temple, a giant sanctuary under the perpetual protection of Jupiter and the gods. Every stone, every road, every hill was part of a living, breathing sacred pact. The city's sprawling growth, its aqueducts, its roads stretching to the ends of the known world, were all extensions of this holy center, a belief that Roman order was divine order made manifest on earth. The divine order of Rome was a sacred boundary drawn around a city, but for a faith that spans the globe, the sacred center is a point of universal return. In the arid valley of western Saudi Arabia, a city pulses with a rhythm unlike any other. Mecca is the spiritual heart of Islam, the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad, and the destination for a journey that defines a lifetime for believers. Its entire identity, its sprawling modern expansion, and its ancient core are oriented around a single, simple structure, the Kaaba. This cube-shaped building, draped in black cloth embroidered with gold calligraphy, stands within the Masjid al-Haram, the Grand Mosque. For nearly 1.4 billion Muslims, it is the Qibla, the direction faced during the 5 daily prayers, a unifying focal point that turns every act of devotion into a silent alignment with this sacred center. The Kaaba's origin story reaches back into the dawn of monotheism itself. Islamic tradition holds that it was first built by the Prophet Abraham and his son Ishmael as a house of worship dedicated to the one God. Over millennia, it is believed to have been lost to idolatry, only to be reclaimed and purified by the Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century. This history makes the site not just a mosque, but a restoration of the original primal covenant between humanity and the divine. To perform the Hajj pilgrimage, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, is to retrace the footsteps of Abraham and Muhammad in a profound physical and spiritual reenactment. Every year, over 2 million pilgrims from every corner of the earth converge on Mecca, all dressed in simple white garments called ihram. This uniform erases distinctions of wealth, nationality, and status, creating a sea of equality before God. The rituals are intensely physical and symbolic. Pilgrims circle the Kaaba 7 times in a counterclockwise direction, a practice known as tawaf. This circumambulation mirrors the motion of celestial bodies and represents the believer's life revolving around the core of their faith. They walk and run between the hills of Safa and Marwa, commemorating Hagar's desperate search for water for her son Ishmael. They gather on the plain of Arafat to stand in prayer from noon until sunset, an act that represents the Day of Judgment. And they participate in the symbolic stoning of pillars representing temptation, a ritual of rejecting evil. The city itself is an architectural marvel built to accommodate this immense temporary population. The Grand Mosque has been expanded again and again, its vast marble courtyards and multi-level prayer spaces capable of holding over 1 million worshippers at once. Elaborate cooling systems combat the desert heat, and complex crowd management technologies guide the flow of humanity. Yet all of this modern engineering exists to serve the ancient rite. Every corridor, every gate, every escalator leads the eye and the body back to the central courtyard and the Kaaba at its heart. The city's urban planning is a radial map of devotion, with highways and neighborhoods all converging on this point. To be in Mecca is to exist in a state of perpetual orientation, where geography itself is a constant reminder of the sacred. The Kaaba is more than a building, it is believed to be a direct connection. Muslims consider it Beit Allah, the house of God, and the spot on earth most beloved by the divine. The black stone set into one of its corners is venerated as a celestial relic, perhaps sent from heaven. While pilgrims do not worship the stone or the building, they honor them as markers of a sacred space where prayers are heard. This transforms Mecca from a mere city into a living axis mundi for a quarter of the world's population. It is a place where the global community of believers becomes visible, tangible, and unified in motion, all drawn to the same square of ground believed to be the first place created on earth and the gateway between heaven and the world of men. The divine order of Mecca draws millions into a single, unifying orbit, but another empire, one of the ancient world's greatest, built its ceremonial heart not for pilgrimage but for pageant. Carved into the side of Mount Mercy in what is now Iran, the ruins of Persepolis still whisper of a sacred spectacle. This was not a city where people lived their daily lives. It was a stage, a colossal theater of stone built by King Darius I around 500 years before the Common Era, where the entire known world was invited to perform its loyalty. The journey to its heart was a carefully choreographed ascent. You would first climb a grand, double-reversing staircase, a design that forced a slow, deliberate pace, allowing the awe to build with every step. At the top, you pass through the Gate of All Nations, flanked by colossal stone bulls with the bearded heads of kings, mythical guardians called Lamashu. Passing between them, you left the ordinary world behind and entered a realm of divine kingship. The vast terrace opened before you, dominated by the Apadana Palace. Its hypostyle hall was a forest of columns, 72 in total, each over 60 feet tall, topped with intricate capitals shaped like bulls or griffins. This was not a residential palace, it was an audience hall of cosmic proportions, designed to hold 10,000 people from every corner of the empire. And here, at the sacred festival of Nowruz, the Persian New Year coinciding with the spring equinox, the empire's spiritual and political order was made spectacularly visible. Delegations from the empire's 23 provinces, from India to Ethiopia and Greece to Central Asia, would process up those staircases. They brought the fruits of their lands, gifts for the king, gifts for the god. The stone reliefs that line the terrace walls immortalize this procession. You see Medes in their rounded hats, Elamites leading lions, Ethiopians carrying ivory tusks, and Greeks bearing woven cloth. Each group is led by a Persian usher, their hands joined in a gesture of respect. This was not a depiction of conquest, but of harmonious integration. It was a visual sermon in stone, proclaiming that all these diverse peoples were willingly united under a single, divinely ordained order. The king, the Shahanshah or King of Kings, sat at the center of this cosmos. He was not considered a god himself, but he ruled by the favor of Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism. In the most important reliefs, Ahura Mazda is depicted as a winged figure within a solar disk, hovering protectively over the king, often as the king receives an enemy combatant or stands triumphant over a mythical beast. This iconography was the empire's theological foundation. The king's authority flowed from heaven, and his primary duty was to maintain a Shah, a concept meaning truth, order, and cosmic harmony, against the forces of chaos and falsehood. Persepolis was the machine for enacting this duty. The receiving of tribute during Nowruz was not mere tax collection, it was a sacred ritual. The gifts were offerings that affirmed the cosmic contract, the king redistributing this wealth to maintain justice and prosperity throughout the land. The entire city, from its precise astronomical alignment to the repetitive, orderly figures on its walls, was a three-dimensional diagram of a stable, righteous universe. To walk its silent processional ways today is to walk through a frozen moment of imperial theology, a belief that the most sacred ground was the platform from which a king, touched by heaven, held the whole world in perfect, peaceful balance. The stone pageant of Persepolis proclaimed an empire's order, but deep in the rainforest, a different kind of power whispered through the trees. In the dense jungles of northern Guatemala, the ancient Maya built a city that was not just a part of the landscape, but a living, breathing extension of its sacred energy. This is Tikal, and its towering temples still claw at the sky, monuments to kings who believed they could speak directly to the other side. To approach Tikal is to feel the weight of that belief. You walk a path under a thick green canopy, the air thick with the calls of howler monkeys and the scent of damp earth. Then the trees part and you see it. Temple 1, the Temple of the Great Jaguar, rises like a stone mountain over 150 feet of steep, narrow steps leading to a summit lost in the mist. It is not alone. Across a vast, grassy clearing known as the Great Plaza, Temple 2, the Temple of the Masks, answers its call. These are not just buildings, they are portals. The Maya saw their pyramids as Wit's sacred mountains. In their cosmology, mountains were hollow, alive with spiritual force, the homes of ancestors and doorways to the realm of the gods. By constructing these colossal limestone peaks, the kings of Tikal were building their own axis mundi, creating artificial mountains where the veil between worlds was thin enough to touch. The Great Plaza itself was a stage for cosmic theater. Flanked by the twin temples, North Acropolis and the Central Acropolis, this immense open space was the city's ritual heart. Imagine it filled with thousands of people, the air thick with the smoke of copal incense. Here, the king, adorned in jade and quetzal feathers, would perform ceremonies of bloodletting and vision quests. He would pierce his tongue or genitals, collecting his blood on bark paper to burn as an offering. In the trance state induced by pain and blood loss, he would commune with his ancestors and the gods, emerging to proclaim their divine messages. These rituals were not private mysteries, they were public spectacles of power, proving the king's unique role as the bridge between his people and the supernatural forces that controlled rain, corn, and the very turning of the stars. Every element of the city was engineered to amplify this sacred connection. The acoustics of the Great Plaza are uncanny. A hand clap at the base of Temple 1 produces a sharp, echoing chirp that mimics the call of the quetzal bird, a creature sacred to the Maya. Was this intentional, a way to make the very stones speak with a divine voice? The alignments were precise. Temples were positioned to track the movements of Venus, the planet of war, its cycles dictating the timing of royal ceremonies and military campaigns. Intricate stone carvings called stelae depicted the king in ritual poses, capturing moments of communion for eternity. And beneath the plazas and pyramids lay a hidden world, a network of caves and sinkholes considered direct entrances to Xibalba, the watery underworld. Tikal was a machine for maintaining cosmic balance, and the king was its chief operator. His rituals in the plaza, his ascents of the temple stairs, were acts of spiritual engineering, necessary work to ensure the sun would rise, the rains would come, and the world would not fall back into chaos. To stand in that silent plaza today with the stone faces of God staring down from the temple tops is to stand in the heart of a vanished belief, a place where the boundary between earth and heaven was built, step by step, to the rhythm of an ancient sacred pulse. The stone portals of Tikal reached for the heavens, but for another civilization, the line between the divine and the mortal was a river to be crossed daily. On the banks of the Nile, a city arose that was not merely dedicated to the gods, but believed to be their actual earthly home. This was Thebes, known today as Luxor, the glittering capital of Egypt's new kingdom. Its sacred geography was a perfect mirror of the Egyptian cosmos, split into two distinct realms by the life-giving river. On the east bank, where the sun rose, stood the domain of the living and the gods. Here, the Karnak temple complex sprawled across the landscape, a staggering testament to divine ambition. Calling it a temple is an understatement. Karnak was a religious metropolis, the largest complex of its kind ever built, constructed, and expanded by pharaohs over 2,000 years. You did not simply walk into Karnak, you processed through it. Its entrance was a grand avenue lined with ram-headed sphinxes leading to the towering first pylon. Beyond it lay a labyrinth of courtyards, obelisks piercing the sky, and hypostyle halls so vast they contained forests of stone columns. The Great Hypostyle Hall alone holds 134 massive columns, the largest so wide it would take 10 people with arms outstretched to circle one. The ceiling, now mostly gone, was once painted with stars, turning the hall into an indoor firmament. This entire stone city was dedicated to Amun-Ra, the king of the gods, a deity so powerful his name means the hidden one. Karnak was his palace on earth, but the true genius of Thebes lay in its duality. For if the east bank, with its temples bathed in sunlight, was the land of the living and the gods, the west bank, where the sun set, was the land of the dead and eternity. Here, in the barren, sun-bleached hills, the pharaohs carved their tombs deep into the rock, creating the Valley of the Kings. This was not a graveyard, it was a hidden gateway to the afterlife. The tombs were elaborate tunnels descending into the earth, their walls covered from floor to ceiling in intricate paintings and hieroglyphs from the Book of the Dead. These were not decorations, they were instruction manuals and magical spells, a guide to help the pharaoh navigate the perils of the underworld, defeat demons, and be reborn alongside the sun god Ra. The most famous, the tomb of Tutankhamun, gives us a glimpse of the opulence buried with a king to ensure his divine status continued. Yet the separation between these two banks, between life and death, was not absolute. Once a year, it was beautifully, ritually bridged. This was the Opet festival, the most important event in the Theban religious calendar. The statues of the divine triad, Amun-Ra, his wife Mut, and their son Khonsu, were carefully removed from their shrines in the dark inner sanctum of Karnak. Placed onto magnificent ceremonial barks, these portable boats were then carried by priests on long poles through the cheering streets. The procession moved from Karnak south along the Nile to the smaller, more elegant Luxor temple. This journey of perhaps 2 miles was a cosmic event. It symbolically reenacted the marriage of Amun-Ra with the pharaoh's divine royal car or spirit. For the duration of the festival, the pharaoh would enter the Holy of Holies at Luxor temple with the god statue, performing rituals that renewed the king's divine right to rule. It was a recharge of sacred power, a confirmation that the pharaoh was the living son of Amun-Ra. The festival culminated with the statue's return journey to Karnak against the current of the Nile, symbolizing a triumphant rebirth. The entire city was part of this theater. The route was lined with kiosks for the barks to rest, and the people would feast, celebrating the rejuvenation of not just their king, but the entire cosmic order. Thebes was a machine for maintaining Mat, the fundamental principle of truth, balance, and harmony. The East Bank temples maintained mat through daily ritual, the West Bank tombs through safe passage to the afterlife, and the Opet festival through the glorious public renewal of the bond between God and King. Every stone, from the colossal columns of Karnak to the hidden chambers in the valley, served this single sacred purpose: to keep heaven and earth in perfect, eternal alignment. Thebes was a sacred machine split by the life-giving Nile, but high in the Andes, another empire built a machine from a single sacred idea. Cusco was not just the capital of the Incan Empire, it was a living diagram of their entire universe. The city itself was a puma, a sacred animal of power. Its head was the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, its massive zigzagging walls forming the teeth. The heart was the main plaza, and the tail was the confluence of two rivers. To walk its streets was to walk inside a divine animal, a constant reminder that the city was a living, breathing entity under the protection of powerful forces. The Incas called it Cusco, the navel of the world. This was not a metaphor. They believed all spiritual and physical energy converged here, making it the absolute center from which their cosmos expanded. At the very core of this puma-shaped city lay its golden heart, the Coricancha, the temple of the sun. To the Incas, the sun god Inti was the ancestor of the royal family, the source of life and imperial authority. The Coricancha was his earthly palace. Spanish chroniclers who saw it before its looting described a sight that defied belief. The interior walls were not merely decorated with gold, they were sheathed in solid gold plates. In the central courtyard, a garden of pure gold existed, with life-sized stalks of corn, llamas and shepherds, all crafted from the precious metal to honor the sun's gift of fertility. The stonework was a masterpiece of sacred engineering, fitted together with such precision that the joints disappeared, a seamless fusion of human skill and divine purpose. This temple was the anchor point, the spiritual power station for the entire empire. From this golden nucleus, the sacred energy of Cusco did not simply radiate randomly. It was channeled along precise, invisible lines known as sects. Think of these not as roads, but as spiritual ley lines, hundreds of them, fanning out from the Coricancha like the spokes of a wheel or rays from the sun. Each line was a carefully maintained pathway connecting a series of huacas or sacred shrines. A huaca could be almost anything: a natural spring, an oddly shaped boulder, a cave, or a man-made altar. There were hundreds of these huacas in the Cusco Valley alone, each one a point of contact with the spiritual world, each assigned to a specific clan or social group for maintenance and worship. This system of sects and huacas was far more than a religious map. It was the empire's operating system. It organized time, space, and society into one unified whole. The lines divided the city and surrounding lands into distinct sectors, which corresponded to different social groups and their responsibilities. The calendar was regulated by observing the sun and shadows against specific huacas along the sects, telling the priests when to plant, when to harvest, and when to hold festivals. Rituals would proceed in sequence from one huaca to the next along a line, a physical pilgrimage through the sacred landscape. This meant the entire valley of Cusco was a colossal, open-air temple, a clock, and a social registry, all governed by the lines emanating from the golden heart of the Coricancha. The genius was in its comprehensiveness. Every stone, spring, and hill in the valley had a place and a purpose in this cosmological scheme. It wove the natural world, the built environment, and human society into a single sacred fabric. For the Inca, to live in Cusco was to live inside a conscious, active model of the cosmos, where every daily action, from drawing water from a spring to walking a certain path, could be an act of participation in maintaining universal order. The city was not built on sacred ground, it was engineered to be sacred ground, a navel connected to everything by threads of stone, water, and belief. The engineered cosmos of Cusco was a living map of belief, yet long before the Inca, another culture was drawing sacred geometry directly onto the earth. On the windswept Salisbury Plain in England, a different kind of metropolis rose, one built not for the living, but for the dead and the eternal cycles they watched. This is the landscape of Stonehenge, but to see only the famous circle of standing stones is to miss the true scale of the vision. This was not an isolated monument, but the glittering, hard center of a vast spiritual complex, a Neolithic cathedral city without walls. The great sarsen stones, hauled from miles away and capped with lintels, form a masterpiece of prehistoric engineering. Their alignment is precise, the central axis pointing to the spot on the horizon where the sun rises on the summer solstice. On that longest day, sunlight pierces the heart of the circle, a dramatic confirmation of cosmic order. For centuries, this has been seen as a celestial calendar, but recent discoveries suggest a darker, more profound purpose. The ground within and around Stonehenge is rich with cremated human remains. This was likely a place of the dead, a sacred cemetery for the elite, where the bones of ancestors were interred within the stone framework of the heavens. The circle was a permanent gateway, aligning the realm of the departed with the sun's rebirth. Yet a city of the dead requires a city for the living. Just a short walk to the northeast lies the true settlement, a place called Durrington Walls. Here, the evidence is not of silence and stone, but of roaring life. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of hundreds of timber houses, along with staggering quantities of animal bones, particularly from pigs. The analysis of these bones tells a vivid story. They were slaughtered in midwinter at 9 months old. This was not a year-round village, but a seasonal boom town, a festival ground that erupted into existence for brief, intense periods. Imagine this scene during the winter solstice, the darkest time of the year. Thousands of people would have journeyed from across Britain to gather at Durrington Walls. They would feast on pork, the air thick with wood smoke and celebration. This was the place of the living, feasting and honoring life, just as the silent stones nearby honored the dead. These two poles, the houses of the living and the temple of the dead, were connected by a sacred geography. A processional avenue, its banks still visible today, leads from the timber circle at Durrington down to the river Avon. Following the water, the path then turns and climbs up to the high ground, terminating directly at Stonehenge itself. This was not a casual footpath, it was a ritual highway. We can reconstruct the ceremony. The people, having feasted through the winter night at Durrington Walls, would form a procession at dawn. They would walk this avenue, following the river and then ascending the slope, arriving at the stone circle as the sun rose on the shortest day. In that moment, the entire landscape became a theater for the most important drama, the symbolic death and rebirth of the sun, mirrored by the journey from the houses of life to the temple of death. The bones of their ancestors resting within the circle were part of this renewal. This entire complex, spanning miles, functioned as a single, integrated spiritual metropolis. Durrington Walls was the transient, vibrant city of the celebrants, Stonehenge the eternal stone city of the ancestors. The avenue was the sacred corridor that linked them in a cycle of ritual. It was a belief system made physical, where every feast, every procession, every aligned sunrise was an act of cosmic maintenance, ensuring the sun would return, the seasons would turn, and the community, both living and dead, would endure. This was a sacred ground not marked by a single building, but by an entire choreographed landscape, a belief in stone, timber, and pathway that shaped the very identity of prehistoric Britain. The silent, engineered landscape of Stonehenge was a sacred machine for an entire island. Far to the southeast, in the arid mountains of Jordan, another civilization built their sanctuary not from stone they quarried, but from stone they found. The approach to Petra is a deliberate act of revelation. You do not see it. You walk for over a mile through a deep, narrow fissure in the earth, the sick, with towering sandstone walls closing in, the sky a distant ribbon of blue above. The path twists and turns, the air cool and shadowed. Then the canyon widens slightly, and through a final slit in the rock, you glimpse a facade of impossible elegance glowing with the warm, rose-red hue of the living stone. This is Al-Kosne, the treasury, and it is not a building placed upon the ground. It is a mountain transformed into architecture. The Nabateans, a nomadic Arab tribe who mastered the caravan trade, did not construct Petra, they revealed it. They saw the divine not in building upward, but in carving inward, believing the sacred essence of the earth could be sculpted into a dwelling for gods, kings, and spirits. Al-Kosne, with its towering columns and intricate carvings of gods and eagles, is the most famous of these revelations. While its popular name comes from a legend of hidden treasure, scholars believe it was a royal tomb and, more importantly, a temple. The entire facade is a theological statement. The central figure at the top is Al-Uzza, a major Nabatean goddess, suggesting this was a place where the divine was invited to reside within the very fabric of the cliff. To stand before it is to witness a mountain made into a monument, a belief that the gods could be housed within the earth itself. But the sacred life of Petra reached much higher. To understand the city's spiritual pulse, you must climb. A steep, ancient stairway carved into the cliffside leads you up to a windswept plateau atop a mountain called Jebel Madba. This is the high place of sacrifice. Here, on this barren, sun-baked platform, you find altars and channels cut directly into the bedrock. This was not a place for quiet contemplation. It was a place for solemn, public ritual. Animals, likely bulls or goats, would be sacrificed here, their blood channeled away through the stone grooves. The act, performed under the open sky with the entire city spread out far below, was a direct offering to the gods, a plea or a thanksgiving made from the highest possible point, physically and spiritually closer to the heavens. The view from this summit is breathtaking, a reminder of why the Nabateans chose this hidden canyon. The natural grandeur was not just practical defense, it was theological. The towering cliffs and narrow entrance created a sense of a secluded, protected sanctuary, a womb of stone where the sacred was contained and amplified. Yet, in this desert landscape, the most profound miracle was not stone but water. Petra should not exist. It is in the heart of a desert. The Nabateans were hydrological geniuses. They engineered an intricate system of dams, cisterns, and ceramic pipelines that captured every drop of seasonal floodwater from the surrounding mountains, channeling it into the city. In a land where water is life, this was not merely civil engineering, it was sacred stewardship. The ability to bring forth water from the rock was seen as a divine blessing, a sign that the gods favored this place and its people. The life-giving channels were as much a part of the city's sacred infrastructure as the temples and high places. Petra was a harmonious whole, a city where commerce, spirituality, and survival were woven together by the same hand that carved the rock. The tombs, the temples, the water channels, and the sacrificial heights all spoke of a civilization that saw the desert not as an empty wasteland, but as a landscape brimming with spiritual potential, waiting to be sculpted into a permanent rose-red prayer. The desert sanctuary of Petra revealed the sacred within the living rock, but an earlier civilization sought a different kind of perfection, one of pure mathematical order. In the floodplains of the Indus River, a city emerged that seemed to defy the chaos of the ancient world. Mohenjo-Daro, one of the largest settlements of the Indus Valley civilization, thrived over 4,000 years ago, yet its spirit remains a profound enigma. We have no deciphered texts, no grand temples or palaces shouting of kings and conquests. Instead, we find a silent, sprawling metropolis that whispers of a different sacred ideal, harmony. Walking through its excavated streets, you are struck first by the overwhelming sense of planning. The city is laid out in a near-perfect grid. Main avenues run straight north-south and east-west, with smaller lanes branching off at right angles. The bricks used in construction are standardized, their uniform ratios found across the entire Indus region. This is not haphazard growth, it is a conscious, sweeping design. But why scholars suggest this rigid order was more than civic efficiency? It may have been a cosmological statement. The precise alignment to cardinal directions, the repetitive, balanced layout, could reflect a belief that the city itself should mirror the orderly, harmonious workings of the universe. To live within this perfect grid was to live in alignment with a sacred blueprint for society. At the physical and possibly spiritual heart of this orderly city lies its most iconic structure, the Great Bath. This is an exquisite brick-lined pool, sealed with bitumen to be watertight, fed by a well and drained by an elaborate outlet. It sits within a raised courtyard surrounded by small rooms. This was clearly not a public swimming pool for leisure. Its construction is too meticulous, its setting too formal. The leading theory is that it served a ritual purification function. Water, in many ancient cultures, was a symbol of both physical and spiritual cleansing. Priests or elite citizens may have performed ablutions here, their rituals washing away impurity and restoring spiritual balance, a liquid sacrament at the center of the city's geometric soul. While we lack written prayers, the artifacts left behind hint at a rich spiritual life. Small, hand-modeled clay figurines, often depicting women with elaborate headdresses and jewelry, are found in homes. These are widely interpreted as representations of a mother goddess, a nurturing, protective deity connected to fertility, the household, and the earth. Their presence in domestic spaces suggests a personal, everyday form of worship that permeated daily life. Then there are the seals, thousands of small, square steatite seals carved with exquisite skill, show a mesmerizing array of animals, elephants, rhinos, bulls, and a mysterious single-horned creature often called a unicorn. These animals are frequently depicted with ritual objects like incense burners or feeding troughs, suggesting they were not just fauna but sacred symbols, perhaps totems or vehicles of divine power. Most tantalizing of all is a seal that shows a figure seated in a yogic posture, arms outstretched, surrounded by animals. Many see in this a prototype of the later Hindu god Shiva, in his aspect as Pashupati, the lord of animals. It is a haunting glimpse of a spiritual idea that would echo for millennia. The overall impression of Mohenjo-Daro is of a sacred experiment. Here was a society that may have believed the divine was not found in towering monuments to ego, but in the quiet perfection of communal order, in the cleansing power of water, and in the humble figurines guarding the home. Their sanctity was woven into the grid of their streets and the rituals of their bath, a testament to the idea that the most sacred ground might be that which fosters perfect, peaceful harmony. The silent order of Mohenjo-Daro speaks of a sacred harmony, but across the continent, another civilization built its power from a different kind of stone. In the grassy highlands of southern Africa, a city of granite rises from the earth, its walls flowing over the landscape like a natural extension of the bedrock itself. This is Great Zimbabwe, the largest ancient structure south of the Sahara Desert, and its very name means simply houses of stone. To stand before its walls is to feel a presence, a weight of history and mystery built without a single drop of mortar. The stones are not cut into blocks but carefully selected from the surrounding hills, fitted together with such skill that they have endured for over 800 years. This was not mere construction, it was a sacred craft, a way of binding the power of the land into a permanent statement of authority. The city is divided into three main areas, but it is the great enclosure that captures the imagination and holds the deepest secrets. This massive oval wall, over 30 feet high in places, encloses a space large enough to hold thousands. Inside, the air is still, the sounds of the outside world muted by the towering granite. And here you find the structure that defines the entire site, the conical tower. This solid tower, built of the same finely fitted stone, rises like a silent sentinel. It has no doors, no windows, no internal chambers. Its purpose is a riddle that has puzzled explorers and archaeologists for generations. Was it a granary, a symbol of royal wealth and fertility, a phallic symbol representing the king's generative power, or perhaps an abstract representation of a sacred grain bin, connecting the ruler to the land's bounty and the well-being of the people? The truth is, we may never know for certain, and that is part of its power. The tower does not explain itself. It simply is a permanent, enigmatic focal point for rituals and beliefs we can only glimpse. What we do understand is that Great Zimbabwe was far more than a fortress or a trading hub, though it was both of those things. It was the spiritual and political heart of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe. Its rulers were not just kings, they were Mwene, owners of the land, and divine intermediaries. They stood between the people and Mwere, the supreme creator god who spoke through oracles and controlled the rains and fertility of the land. The city's very location was likely chosen for its spiritual significance, a place where the earthly and divine realms converged. From this sacred center, the king mediated with Mwere, performing rituals to ensure rain for the crops and prosperity for the kingdom. His authority was literally set in stone, the immense, unmortared walls a physical manifestation of a power that was both political and profoundly sacred. The stonework was the kingdom's theology made visible, enduring, immutable, and deeply connected to the earth from which it came. The city's layout reinforced this sacred hierarchy. The hill complex, perched on a natural granite dome, is thought to have been the ritual center, the domain of the king and the priests. Below, the great enclosure likely served as the royal palace, a private sanctuary for the royal family and the site of important ceremonies. Further out lay the valley complex, where the majority of the population lived. This spatial arrangement was a map of spiritual and social order, from the sacred peak down to the secular valleys, all protected and unified by those iconic walls. Great Zimbabwe was a statement in granite, a belief that the stability of the kingdom, the favor of the gods, and the legitimacy of the king could be woven into the very fabric of a city, stone by carefully chosen stone, creating a sacred ground that would echo long after its rulers were gone. Granite walls speak of earthly power, but in the humid air of the rainforest, a city whispers of a more personal journey to the other side. Deep in the Chiapas jungle of Mexico, where howler monkeys call from the canopy and mist clings to the mountainsides, the ruins of Palenque emerge from the green. This is not a city of overwhelming scale, but of breathtaking elegance, its limestone temples and palaces adorned with delicate stucco reliefs and graceful roof combs that seem to float above the trees. For many, it is the most beautiful of all Maya cities, a place where art, architecture, and profound spiritual belief were fused into a single, harmonious vision. The heart of this vision, and the key to understanding Palenque's sacred purpose, lies buried within the largest structure on the site, the Temple of the Inscriptions. This stepped pyramid is not solid, it is a hollow shell built over a secret. In the 1950s, an archaeologist named Alberto Ruslulia noticed an unusual set of holes in the floor of the temple at its summit, leading him to discover a hidden stairway filled with rubble. After years of careful excavation, he descended deep into the pyramid's core, finally reaching a vaulted chamber. There, he found a single, massive stone sarcophagus, sealed for over 1,000 years. Inside was the body of King Kainish Janob Pakal, known as Pakal the Great, who ruled Palenque for most of the 7th century. The discovery was monumental, the first known pyramid tomb in the Americas, proving these structures were not just temples, but also royal mausoleums, sacred mountains containing the physical remains of divine kings. The lid of Pakal's sarcophagus is a masterpiece of sacred art, a complex diagram of the king's journey. It shows Pakal not in death, but in dynamic motion, falling backwards along the trunk of the world tree, the axis of the Maya cosmos. He descends into the jaws of the underworld, yet his body sprouts the leaves of the maize plant. This is not an end, but a transformation. Pakal is depicted being reborn as the maize god, the deity of life, sustenance, and resurrection. For the Maya, maize was more than food, it was the very substance from which humanity was formed. The king's death and rebirth mirrored the agricultural cycle, the seed buried in the earth to give new life. His tomb, set at the base of the Pyramid Temple, placed him at the symbolic root of the world tree, anchoring the city's sacred power and ensuring his continued presence as a divine ancestor who could intercede with the gods. But Palink's sacred dialogue was not just with the underworld, it was with the living landscape itself. The city is laced with natural springs and streams, and the Maya engineers did not fight this water, they celebrated it. They built an intricate aqueduct under the main plaza, not to hide the water, but to channel its sacred flow right through the heart of the civic and ceremonial space. The gentle sound of moving water would have been a constant backdrop to rituals. Elsewhere, a royal bathhouse was fed by a spring, turning personal cleansing into a ritual act within a natural grotto. The palaces and temples were positioned in concert with these water features, the architecture blending with the topography rather than dominating it. This integration created a profound sense that the city was a living part of the rainforest, a chosen place where the boundary between the earthly realm and the supernatural realm, or Zabalba, was exceptionally thin. The elegant buildings with their open courtyards and airy corridors were not just seats of power, they were portals. From his palace, with its unique four-story tower likely used for astronomical observation, Pakal and his successors could communicate with ancestors and gods, their rituals amplified by the sacred springs and the enveloping jungle. Palink was designed as a permanent gateway, a place where a king could descend into the underworld as maize, and where the living could feel the breath of the other side in the cool water flowing from the earth and in the mist rising from the trees. It was a city that understood the sacred not as a separate domain, but as a current running through the world waiting to be channeled by stone and faith. The flowing waters of Palink channeled life and spirit, but in the quiet valleys of Japan, a different kind of sacred fusion took root. Nara, Japan's first permanent capital, was not born from conquest but from a deliberate spiritual vision. When the imperial court settled here in the 8th century, they sought more than a strategic location, they sought a center of cosmic harmony. The city's grand layout was a conscious import, modeled on the grid of the great Chinese capital of Chang'an, a symbol of advanced civilization and imperial order. Yet into this rational, geometric plan, the Japanese poured the ancient, animistic soul of their own land. This was not a simple copy, it was a sacred alchemy. At the physical and spiritual heart of this experiment stands Todai-ji Temple. Its main hall, the Daibutsudan, is a breathtaking feat of wooden architecture, still the largest wooden building on Earth. To stand before it is to feel dwarfed, not just by its scale, but by its purpose. Inside resides the Daibutsu, a colossal bronze statue of Buddha Vairocana, the cosmic Buddha who embodies the fundamental nature of reality. Casting this statue consumed nearly all of Japan's bronze at the time, a national undertaking of faith. The Buddha's serene gaze and immense presence were meant to project spiritual power and stability across the entire nation, anchoring the new capital in Buddhist universal truth. But the sacred landscape of Nara refused to be purely Buddhist. The indigenous faith of Shinto, with its deep reverence for nature spirits known as kami, permeated the very soil. The city's planners faced a profound question: how to reconcile the imported, universal cosmology of Buddhism with the local, ancestral spirits of the mountains, forests, and streams. Their answer was not to choose, but to blend. Shinto shrines were erected alongside Buddhist temples in a syncretic system called Shinbutsu Shugo. The kami were often seen as local manifestations or protectors of Buddhist deities. This fusion is embodied by the free-roaming deer of Nara Park. In Shinto, deer are considered sacred messengers of the gods, particularly from the nearby Kasuga Taisha shrine. Their protected, gentle presence among the temple precincts is a living symbol, the ancient spirits of the land walking peacefully alongside the grand monuments of Buddhist doctrine. They are not just animals, they are mobile kami, a constant reminder that the sacred was not confined to temple walls. This unique synthesis shaped the city's entire character. The grid of Chang'an provided the orderly skeleton, but the flesh and spirit were uniquely Japanese. Processions from the Kasuga shrine to Todai would weave through the streets, physically connecting the two traditions. The surrounding hills, each believed to hold protective kami, were not leveled for construction but revered as natural fortifications and sacred backdrops. Nara became a living diagram of a spiritual ideal, a place where the structured, universal law of Buddhism could coexist with the intimate, localized spirit of Shinto. It was an attempt to build a capital that was not just a seat of political power, but a microcosm of a harmonized world, where every deer's step was a prayer and every towering wooden beam supported a unified heaven. The harmony of Nara was a deliberate fusion, a city planned for spiritual balance. But 5,000 years ago, in a remote valley along the dry coast of Peru, a different kind of harmony was being engineered from the ground up. Carroll is a city of whispers. Its ruins, sprawling across the Soup Valley, are the oldest known urban center in the Americas, a metropolis that thrived a full millennium before the pyramids of Giza were even conceived. To walk its sun-baked plazas today is to stand at the very dawn of civilization in the New World, in a place that seems to defy everything we assume about why cities first form. There are no fortifications here, no high walls, no signs of warfare. The artifacts tell a startling story. Not a single weapon has been found. Instead, the ground is littered with the remnants of music, flutes carved from condor and pelican bones, and cornets made from llama and deer bones. This was not a society organized for conquest, but for something else entirely. The city's layout is its scripture. 6 large platform mounds, massive earth and stone constructions dominate the site. These are not random piles, they are precisely placed with a central, larger mound facing a series of smaller ones across a vast public plaza. This arrangement creates a sense of hierarchy and focus, drawing the eye and the body toward the ceremonial core. But the most intriguing features are the sunken circular plazas. These are not wells or reservoirs, they are carefully engineered depressions, often located at the foot of the major mounds. To enter one is to descend into a separate, intimate world, cut off from the horizon, the sky becoming a perfect circle above you. Archaeologists believe these plazas were theaters for ritual, spaces where the community gathered for ceremonies that connected them to the earth and the heavens. The architecture itself was a sacred machine. The main pyramid, known as the Pyramid Maya, is aligned with certain stars. The entire city's orientation seems to be calibrated to celestial events, particularly the rising and setting of the sun, and the constellations important to the people of the North Chico culture. They were building a clock and a calendar from dirt and stone, anchoring their community to the reliable cycles of the cosmos. This celestial alignment was likely tied to their survival. The Soup Valley is arid, a desert strip between the Pacific Ocean and the Andes. The lifeblood of Carroll was not rainfall, but irrigation, channeling water from the river to grow crops like cotton and squash. Their prosperity depended on understanding seasonal floods and astronomical cycles. By building their city as an observatory and a temple, they were performing a profound act of sympathetic magic. They believed that by mirroring the order of the heavens on earth in the placement of their mounds and plazas, they could harness those cosmic forces to ensure water, fertility, and communal well-being. The energy required to build these mounds was immense, involving moving thousands of tons of stone and earth in woven reed bags. This labor was not coerced by a warrior king, but likely inspired by shared belief. The society appears to have been theocratic, led by priest astronomers who could read the sky and orchestrate the rituals that kept the world in balance. Carroll's power came from trade, from its cotton textiles and fishing nets exchanged with communities in the highlands and along the coast, and from religion, the binding force that organized that labor and distributed those goods. It presents a quiet, revolutionary model. Here, on this ancient Peruvian ground, the first American city was not a fortress but a temple. Its walls were not for keeping enemies out, but for channeling celestial energy in, a sacred center built on the belief that harmony with the universe was the surest foundation for a society to thrive. That sacred harmony at Carol, born from starlight and shared belief, would find a far more tumultuous expression on the other side of the world. On the western coast of what is now Turkey, a city thrived not as a quiet theocracy, but as a roaring cosmopolitan crossroads. Ephesus was a city of layers, a place where the sacred was not a single truth, but a conversation, sometimes a shouting match between competing visions of the divine. Its power stemmed from its location, a bustling port at the mouth of the Casta River, where trade routes from east and west converged. And at the very heart of this commercial frenzy stood a spiritual anchor so magnificent it drew the ancient world on a pilgrimage. The Temple of Artemis was not just a local shrine, it was a global phenomenon. One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, this colossal structure was 4 times larger than the Parthenon in Athens. Its roof was supported by over 100 marble columns, each standing 60 feet tall. Inside, in the dim, incense-heavy air, stood the cult statue of Artemis, not the slender huntress of Greek myth, but a more ancient, potent figure. The Ephesian Artemis was a goddess of fertility and wild nature, her torso draped with what appear to be multiple breasts or perhaps bull testicles, symbols of overwhelming generative power. Pilgrims from across the Mediterranean would journey here not just to admire the architecture, but to stand in the presence of this awesome deity. The temple was more than a house of worship, it was a bank, a sanctuary, and a symbol of civic pride so potent that its destruction by arson was seen as a catastrophe foretold by the gods. This sacred ground, magnetized by Artemis, made Ephesus immensely wealthy and influential. Yet, into this entrenched world of pagan procession and imperial cult, a new and radically different voice arrived. In the 1st century, Ephesus became a crucial battleground for the early Christian faith. The Apostle Paul lived here for over 2 years, preaching in the synagogues and the famous lecture hall of Tyrannus. His message of one God and a resurrected Savior directly challenged the economic and spiritual ecosystem built around Artemis. The reaction was swift and violent. A silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of the temple, stirred up a city-wide riot, fearing Paul's teachings would destroy their livelihood and dishonor the great goddess. The crowd poured into the vast theater, which could hold 25,000 people, chanting for hours, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." This was not merely a theological dispute, it was a clash of sacred economies, a fight over which divine power truly owned the city's soul. Christianity, however, would not be expelled. It took root and grew. Tradition holds that the Virgin Mary spent her last years in a small stone house on a wooded hill near Ephesus, cared for by the Apostle John. That humble site, today known as the House of the Virgin Mary, became a quiet, reflective counterpoint to the colossal marble temple in the valley below. Later, the Emperor Justinian would build the massive Basilica of St. John over the believed burial site of the evangelist, its grand arches asserting Christian dominion over the landscape. So, walking through Ephesus today is to walk through a palimpsest of belief. You stroll down the magnificent Curate Street, past statues dedicated to Roman emperors worshipped as gods. You stand in the theater where the riot for Artemis raged. You gaze at the scant, swampy foundations of the great temple of Artemis, a single reconstructed column hinting at its former glory. And then you look up to the hills, to the basilica and the humble house, symbols of the faith that ultimately outlasted the wonder. Ephesus embodies a profound truth about sacred cities. The ground itself is neutral. Its holiness is assigned, fought over, and reassigned by the people who build upon it. One generation's axis mundi can become the next generation's archaeological footnote, as new beliefs write their own sacred stories onto the same enduring earth. That conversation between faiths in Ephesus was a battle for a city's soul, but in the dense jungles of Sri Lanka, a king sought to build his soul's fortress on a rock already claimed by heaven. Rising nearly 600 feet from the surrounding plains, Sigiriya, the Lion Rock, is a geological marvel. It is a sheer column of magma from an ancient volcano, its red stone walls towering over the green canopy. In the 5th century, this was not just a landmark, it was a canvas for one man's desperate ambition and a sacred site he tried to claim for himself. King Kashyapa was a usurper. He seized the throne by having his father, the rightful king, walled up alive. Paralyzed by guilt and fear of retribution from his exiled brother, Kashyapa needed a capital that was not just a city, but an impregnable stronghold and a statement of divine right. He chose Sigiriya. The engineering feat is staggering. The king's builders constructed a palace complex on the very summit of this impossible rock. To reach it, you begin a climb that feels like an assault on the sky. The path clings to the cliff face, at one point passing a sheltered alcove where you encounter the most unexpected sight. Here, preserved against the tropical humidity, are the Sigiriya frescoes, paintings of celestial maidens. These women, adorned in jewels and carrying flowers, seem to float against a golden background. They are not portraits of court ladies, but apsaras, divine beings from Buddhist and Hindu cosmology. Their presence on the rock's midsection transforms the ascent. You are no longer just climbing to a fortress, you are passing through a realm of gods and spirits, a gallery of the divine watching your journey. Further up, you come to a remarkable feature, the mirror wall. Originally, this long, polished parapet was coated with a lime plaster so fine it was said the king could see his reflection as he walked. Over centuries, visitors scratched thousands of inscriptions onto its surface, poems and observations from as early as the 8th century, making it one of the oldest known graffiti walls in the world. But its initial purpose was likely ritualistic. That brilliant, reflective surface catching the sun high on the rock would have shone like a beacon, a man-made star on a sacred mountain. It created a liminal space, a place of reflection in both senses, separating the earthly climb below from the heavenly abode above. The final approach to the summit is guarded by the namesake of the rock. You pass through the massive paws of a lion, all that remains of a gigantic brick and plaster statue that once crouched against the stone. The entrance to the palace would have been through the lion's mouth. This was potent symbolism. The lion is a universal emblem of royal power, but in Buddhist tradition, it is also the vehicle of the Bodhisattva Manjushri and a symbol of the Buddha himself, whose teachings are sometimes called the lion's roar. By entering through the lion, Kashyapa was symbolically being born into a new divine kingship. And then you emerge onto the summit. The view is breathtaking, a king's eye view of the world. The ruins of the palace are modest, but the sensation is not. Standing there, with the wind whipping around you and the world spread out at your feet, you understand Kashyapa's aspiration. He built his palace in the sky, not just for defense, but to be closer to the gods, to elevate himself, a mortal king stained by sin, to a near-divine status. He was trying to become the Axis Mundi himself, yet the rock had a deeper history. Evidence suggests Sigiriya was used as a mountain monastery by Buddhist monks centuries before Kashyapa's time. The caves at its base bear inscriptions of donations to the monastic community. And after Kashyapa's dramatic fall in battle just 11 years after moving in, the site reverted to a monastery for nearly 1,000 years. The sacred ground reclaimed its original purpose. The king's audacious palace became a meditation platform for monks, his mirror wall a surface for pious verses, his lion gateway a reminder of the Buddha's roar, not the king's power. Sigiriya stands as a profound lesson. A king can build his dream of heaven on a rock, but if that rock is already sacred, his dream is only a temporary tenant. The true power of the place lies not in the fortress at the top, but in the enduring spiritual gravity that pulls it back again and again back to its original hallowed purpose. Caxiapa's rock was a fortress of ambition, but the Aztecs built their divine capital on a vision in the water. Tenochtitlan was an impossibility made real, a glittering city of canals and temples floating on the vast, shallow expanse of Lake Texcoco. Its very existence was a testament to sacred engineering on a breathtaking scale. The story of its founding is not one of convenience but of prophecy. The Aztec people, then a wandering tribe, were told by their patron god Huitzilopochtli to search for a specific sign: an eagle perched on a cactus devouring a snake. After generations of migration, they finally saw it on a small, swampy island in the lake. This was not prime real estate by any earthly measure, but it was the divine command. They believed the cactus grew from the heart of a defeated earth monster, making the ground itself sacred, the literal heart of a conquered world. And so they began to build their city upon the unstable mud and reeds, a decision that would force them to become masters of their environment. The city they created was a wonder. At its peak, it was one of the largest cities in the world, home to perhaps 200,000 people. Canals served as waterways, dividing districts and functioning like Venetian streets, with canoes ferrying people and goods. 3 massive causeways, miles long, connected the island to the mainland, equipped with bridges that could be raised for defense. But beneath this practical urban plan was a sacred geometry. The city's layout was a conscious reflection of the cosmos, its major canals and avenues aligned to cardinal directions, dividing Tenochtitlan into 4 quarters that mirrored the 4 quadrants of the Aztec universe. At the absolute center of this cosmic diagram stood the Templo Mayor, the Great Temple. This was not just a pyramid, it was a sacred mountain containing 2 shrines at its summit. One, painted red and white, was dedicated to Tlaloc, the ancient god of rain and fertility, who ensured the crops would grow. The other, painted red and blue, was for Huitzilopochtli, the god of sun and war. This dual structure embodied the fundamental and terrifying balance at the core of Aztec belief. Tlaloc brought the nourishing rains, but Huitzilopochtli, the warrior sun, required constant nourishment himself to continue his daily battle across the sky. His fuel was Chalchihuatl, precious water, but in the Aztec worldview, the most precious water was human blood. This belief made the Templo Mayor the stage for the most profound and consequential rituals in the empire. Sacrifice was not mere brutality, it was a sacred debt, a form of cosmic recycling. The Aztecs saw themselves as the people chosen to feed the sun, to keep the universe in motion. Without this nourishment, the sun would fail, the world would end in eternal darkness. Victims, often warriors captured in the Flowery Wars, which were battles staged specifically to take captives for this purpose, would be led up the pyramid's steep steps. At the summit, before the images of the gods, their hearts would be offered. The body was then rolled down the blood-slicked stairs. The entire ceremony was a public, communal act of cosmic maintenance, a terrifying transaction to guarantee the sunrise. The temple itself grew like a living thing, layer upon layer built over the old, each new phase encasing the offerings and history of the last. Excavations have revealed astonishing offerings buried within, from masks and statues to entire deposits of marine life, symbolizing the watery realm of Tlaloc. The city's entire economy and political structure orbited this sacred core. Tribute flowed in from conquered territories, food, textiles, feathers, and precious goods, all funneling toward the ceremonial center to support the rituals and the elite. Tenochtitlan was a machine, a beautiful, brutal, and brilliantly engineered machine, designed for one primary purpose: to fulfill a divine covenant and keep the sun moving through the heavens by the power of its sacred, beating heart. The floating city of Tenochtitlan was a machine for cosmic survival, but across the Pacific, another island capital was built for a different kind of permanence. In the fertile plains of central Thailand, the kings of Siam chose a site of profound spiritual geometry. Ayutthaya rose on an island, a natural fortress created by the confluence of three great rivers, the Chao Phraya, the Lopburi, and the Parsak. In Hindu and Buddhist tradition, such a meeting of waters is a place of immense power, a Triveni Sangam where the sacred and the mundane flow together. This was not just a strategic choice for defense and trade, though it excelled at both. It was a declaration that the city itself would be a vessel for divine order. For over 400 years, from the 14th to the 18th century, Ayutthaya was the glittering capital of a mighty kingdom, a global crossroads where Persian merchants, Portuguese explorers, Chinese diplomats, and Japanese traders walked its bustling streets. At its height, it was one of the largest and wealthiest cities in the world, a metropolis of 1 million people, and its wealth was poured relentlessly into the sacred. The skyline was not one of palaces but of spires. Hundreds of Buddhist temples or wats pierced the horizon, their distinctive bell-shaped chedis and ornate prangs creating a forest of stone devotion. Each temple complex was a universe in miniature, with libraries, sermon halls, and monasteries housing thousands of saffron-robed monks. The air would have hummed with the sound of chanting and temple bells, a constant acoustic reminder of the city's primary purpose, to be a center for the Buddhist faith. Walking through the ruins today, you are greeted by serene, monumental faces, enormous stone Buddha images, some seated in meditation, others reclining in final nirvana, gaze out from crumbling brick walls. The most iconic is the stone head of a Buddha entwined in the roots of a bodhi tree at Wat Mahathat, a powerful image of nature reclaiming yet also cradling the sacred. These images were not mere decorations, they were the spiritual residents of the city, embodiments of enlightenment that pilgrims and kings alike would come to honor. The city's very layout was a sacred mandala, a diagram of the cosmos. At the exact center of the island stood the royal palace, surrounded by thick walls. This was the symbolic Mount Meru, the axis of the world in Hindu-Buddhist cosmology. Radiating out from this divine center were concentric zones, the inner city for the nobility and major state temples, the middle city for administration and commerce, and the outer city for the common people and foreign enclaves. Canals and roads followed this radial plan, making the entire city a physical expression of a spiritual blueprint. To live in Ayutthaya was to live within a conscious model of a harmonious universe with the god-king, the Devaraja, at its stable, sacred core. This perfect order, however, was not destined to last forever. In 1767, after a long siege, the Burmese army breached the walls. What followed was not just a military defeat, but a systematic erasure. The city was looted of its immense treasures, its libraries burned, and its population killed or taken into captivity. The Burmese aimed not just to conquer, but to annihilate the spiritual and political heart of their rival. They decapitated the giant Buddha images, toppling the stone heads from their bodies in a deliberate act of religious desecration. The city was set ablaze and abandoned to the jungle. This catastrophic fall is what gives Ayutthaya its haunting, layered sacredness today. The ruins are not merely old, they are a testament to impermanence, the very core of Buddhist teaching. The moss-covered bricks, the headless Buddhas, the chedis split open by banyan trees, all preach a silent, powerful sermon. They show that even the most magnificent creations, even cities built as models of heaven, are subject to decay. This adds a profound layer of sacred memory to the site. It is a place of pilgrimage not just to see ancient glory, but to contemplate loss, resilience, and the cycle of rise and fall. The ground is sacred not only because it was designed to be, but because it bears the wounds of history, making the spiritual lessons of its builders painfully, beautifully tangible. The lesson of Ayutthaya was one of impermanence, but across the world, a different kind of sacred city rose and fell, leaving behind a mystery written not in stone but in earth. On the fertile floodplain of the Mississippi River, across from modern-day St. Louis, the landscape holds a secret, what appears as a series of rolling, grassy hills is in fact the remains of a metropolis. This is Cahokia, and at its peak around the year 1000, it was the largest city north of Mexico, a bustling hub for perhaps 20,000 people. Yet its power did not come from armies or written laws, but from a profound alignment with the sky and the soil. At the heart of this sprawling settlement stands Monk's Mound. This is not a natural formation. It is a colossal terraced pyramid built entirely by hand, basket load by basket load of earth. To stand at its base is to feel a humble awe. It covers 14 acres at its base and rises 100 feet into the air, making it the largest earthen construction in the pre-Columbian Americas. The scale is almost incomprehensible, representing millions of hours of coordinated labor. At its flat summit, archaeologists believe a large temple once stood, likely the residence of a ruler who was both a political leader and a high priest. From this artificial mountain, he would have looked out over his domain, a living link between the people below and the powers above. That domain was centered on the Grand Plaza, a vast, leveled expanse covering nearly 50 acres to the south of the Great Mound. This was not a marketplace or a public square in the European sense. It was a ceremonial theater, meticulously cleared and maintained. Imagine this space during a major gathering filled with thousands of people. Here, rituals would unfold, games like Chunky would be played, and political ceremonies would bind the community together. The plaza's sheer size was a statement of collective purpose, a physical manifestation of the social order that the city's leaders cultivated. But how did they know when to gather, when to plant, when to hold the most sacred ceremonies? The answer lies in a circle of wood. To the west of Monk's Mound, Cahokia's builders erected a structure now called Woodhenge. This was a large circle of massive cedar posts carefully positioned. Its purpose was celestial. Archaeologists discovered that from the center of this circle, an observer would see the sunrise align with specific posts during the equinoxes and solstices. This was a sophisticated solar calendar, a way of marking the passage of the year with precision. The post circle did more than track time, it sacralized it. By knowing exactly when the sun reached its turning points, the priestly class could orchestrate rituals that harmonized human activity with the cosmic cycle. A ceremony at the winter solstice, for instance, could symbolically encourage the sun's return, ensuring the renewal of life for the coming agricultural year. This deep connection to celestial and earthly cycles explains why Cahokia became a pilgrimage center. People from across the Mississippian culture, which spanned much of eastern North America, would have journeyed here. They came not for conquest, but for communion. They came to witness the ceremonies in the Grand Plaza, to ascend the smaller burial mounds where elites were interred with beautiful shell beads and copper ornaments, and to experience the power of a place that so clearly bridged the earthly and the heavenly. The city's location was no accident. The Mississippi floodplain provided incredibly rich soil, the foundation for the surplus agriculture that fed the massive population. But the people of Cahokia saw this fertility as part of a sacred contract. Their rituals, timed by Woodhenge and performed on the earthen pyramids, were acts of gratitude and negotiation with the forces that provided the corn, the beans, and the squash. Then, after centuries of flourishing, Cahokia was gradually abandoned. By the 1400s, the great city was silent. The reasons are still debated: climate change, resource depletion, social upheaval. But what remains is a landscape sculpted by belief. Cahokia challenges our modern imagination. Here was a complex, stratified society that moved mountains of earth to touch the sky, that drew thousands to its ceremonies, and that governed its life by the sun's path, all without the wheel, without draft animals, and without a written word. Its sacred power was built from the very dirt beneath its feet, a testament to the human need to build centers of meaning, to find the axis mundi not in distant lands but in the fertile soil of home. From the earthen pyramids of Cahokia, we journey to a crossroads of empires and ideas where the sacred was woven into the very fabric of trade. Samarkand is not merely old, it is a palimpsest written in silk and turquoise tile. For over 2.5 millennia, this city has stood at the heart of Central Asia, a glittering oasis where caravans from China, Persia, India, and the Mediterranean converged. Its ground is sacred not because of a single founding myth, but because it became a crucible where countless beliefs met, mingled, and were ultimately transformed by a vision of heaven rendered in ceramic. Long before its iconic blue domes pierced the sky, it was known as Maracanda. Alexander the Great marched his armies here, and it is said he stood upon its ancient citadel, marveling at its beauty. For centuries, it was a Zoroastrian center, a Buddhist hub, a Nestorian Christian outpost, and a home to Jewish traders. The spiritual currents of the Silk Road flowed through its bazaars, making it a repository of the world's sacred ideas. This layered history set the stage for its most breathtaking transformation. In the 14th and 15th centuries, under the rule of the Turco-Mongol conqueror Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane, and his descendants, Samarkand was reborn as an imperial capital of staggering ambition. Timur wanted a city that would eclipse all others, a showcase of power that would also serve as a monument to his faith, Islam. The result was an architectural revolution in sacred form. To understand this, you must stand in the Registan. This is not just a square, it is a theater of divine mathematics. Flanked on 3 sides by colossal madrasas or Islamic schools, the space feels both immense and intimate. Each madrasa is a symphony in tile. The facades are covered in millions of pieces of glazed ceramic, forming intricate geometric patterns, swirling arabesques, and majestic calligraphic inscriptions quoting the Quran. The dominant color is a luminous turquoise blue, the color of the heavens in this arid land, symbolizing the divine, the infinite, and paradise. This is sacred geometry made visible. The repeating patterns, which seem to extend infinitely, are a visual representation of the infinite nature of God. The absence of human or animal figures focuses the mind on abstract, transcendent beauty, a beauty meant to lead the observer toward contemplation of the Creator. But the Registan was more than a beautiful space for prayerful thought. It was the ultimate statement of sacred kingship. Each madrasa is named for its royal patron, Ulugh Beg Sherdor Tilya Kori. By building these monumental schools, the Timurid rulers were performing their most important duty. They were patrons of knowledge and piety. The madrasas were universities where students studied theology, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. The ruler's power was demonstrated not just by military might, but by his role as the guardian and promoter of Islamic scholarship and civilization. The square itself functioned as the city's living room and ceremonial heart. Proclamations were read here, festivals were held, and the bustling life of the city swirled around these silent, scholarly sanctuaries. The architecture served a profound psychological purpose. To approach the Sherdor Madrasa, with its striking mosaic tigers chasing sun-faced deer on the portal, was to be overwhelmed by a message. The imagery, though unusual, is still symbolic, representing cosmic power and divine light. You were meant to feel small, to feel the awe of God's creation and the majesty of the king who acted as his earthly steward. This fusion reached its zenith with the Gur-Iamir, the tomb of Timur himself. Its ribbed, fluted dome is a masterpiece, sheathed in tiles that change color from deep blue to golden yellow as the sun moves across the sky. Inside, under a breathtaking ceiling of intricate gilded papier-mâché, lies the conqueror in a single block of dark green jade. The tomb is a powerful assertion. Even in death, the ruler rests in a space that bridges earth and paradise, his legacy sealed in sacred art. Samarkand's sacred ground is therefore a composite. It is the accumulated holiness of Zoroastrian fire, Buddhist stupas, and Christian altars, all paved over by a later vision of Islamic paradise, expressed through the ruler's piety and an artist's tile. The city teaches us that sacredness can be a conscious act of creation, a deliberate layering of beauty and power intended to convince everyone, from the caravan merchant to the foreign ambassador, that they stood not just at a crossroads of trade, but at the very intersection of human ambition and divine inspiration. Yet the geometric perfection of Samarkand was a vision of order imposed upon the world. On the island of Crete, an ancient people built a sacred center that seemed to celebrate something wilder, a fluid dance with divine power. The Palace of Knossos is a place of legend, the heart of the Minoan civilization, and the very ground where the myth of the Minotaur was born. To walk its reconstructed colonnades is to step into a story that blurs the line between archaeology and mythology. The ruins whisper of a society that saw the sacred not in stern temples, but in the vibrant, chaotic heart of a labyrinth. According to the Greek tale, King Minos of Crete commissioned the genius Daedalus to build a maze beneath his palace to contain the Minotaur, a monstrous half-man, half-bull born from a divine curse. Every 9 years, Athens was forced to send 7 youths and 7 maidens into this labyrinth as tribute, where they would be lost forever, consumed by the beast. It is a story of terror, but also of profound sacred geography. The labyrinth was not just a prison, it was a ritual space, a confusing path leading to a monstrous, divine encounter at its center. And the stunning truth that archaeology suggests is that the palace itself was the labyrinth. The sprawling complex at Knossos, with its hundreds of interconnecting rooms, corridors that suddenly turn back on themselves, and multiple levels, would have been utterly disorienting to a first-time visitor. You would not need a mythical maze beneath the floors. The entire palace, with its sudden light wells and dead-end hallways, functioned as a sacred puzzle. This architectural confusion was likely intentional. It was not meant to trap victims, but to guide initiates through a ritual experience. The journey through the complex, twisting passages mirrored a spiritual journey inward, a confrontation with the primal forces at the core of Minoan belief. And at the heart of that belief was the bull. Throughout Knossos, the symbol of the bull is everywhere, in vibrant frescoes on ritual vessels, and in the very form of sacred horns of consecration that crown the architecture. The most famous image is the bull leaping fresco. It shows a breathtaking scene, an acrobat somersaulting over the back of a charging bull, caught mid-flight by 2 other figures. This was not a sport, it was almost certainly a religious ceremony, a dangerous dance of life and death performed in the palace's central court. The bull represented raw, untamed power, a symbol of the god Poseidon or perhaps a potent earth deity. By mastering the bull, not through killing it but through an elegant, athletic vault, the leaper was performing a sacred act of mediation. They were bringing chaotic natural force under a semblance of human control, channeling that divine energy for the benefit of the community. This ritual connected directly to the myth. The Minotaur at the center of the labyrinth is the ultimate fusion of man and bull, a divine monster. The hero Theseus, who finally slays it, represents a new order overcoming an older, more terrifying form of sacred power. The palace itself provided the stage for this cosmic drama. Key spaces within Knossos reinforce its sacred purpose. There are lustral basins, sunken rooms reached by short flights of stairs, likely used for ritual purification before ceremonies. There are pillar crypts, dark chambers where massive columns were found, marked with repeated double-axe symbols, the labries. This word is thought to be the origin of the term labyrinth, meaning the house of the double axe. The axe was not a weapon here, but a sacred tool for sacrifice, a symbol of divine authority that cleaves the world into sacred and profane. And presiding over it all seems to have been not a fearsome male god, but a powerful mother goddess. Figurines and seals depict a serene, dominant female figure, often flanked by animals or holding snakes. She appears as the mistress of the natural world, a life-giving and perhaps fearsome deity who demanded the bull-leaping rituals and received offerings in the palace's inner sanctums. The ruler of Knossos, the priest-king depicted in surviving art, likely derived his power from serving as her chief intermediary. The palace was therefore a machine for generating and managing sacred power. Its confusing layout created a ritual journey. Its central court hosted the breathtaking bull dance. Its dark crypts held the symbols of sacrifice. Every twist and turn, every painted bull and graceful goddess, wove the daily life of administration, storage, and ceremony into a single, continuous sacred performance. Knossos suggests that for the Minoans, the divine was not separate from daily life. It was an exhilarating and dangerous force that lived in the very corridors of power, a force that had to be confronted, danced with, and respectfully contained within the beautiful, bewildering walls of the labyrinth. The labyrinth of Knossos held a sacred, inward-turning power, but on the dusty plains of northern Pakistan, a different kind of sanctuary opened its doors to the world. Taxila was not a city of palaces or defensive walls, but a city of classrooms. For nearly 1,000 years, from the 6th century before the Common Era to the 5th century after, this was one of the ancient world's greatest university towns, a spiritual and intellectual beacon where the ground itself was consecrated not by a temple to a god, but by the pursuit of enlightenment. Its sacred geography was mapped by a revolutionary idea that peace and knowledge were the highest forms of devotion. Situated at a vital junction on the Silk Road, Taxila was a living crossroads. Persian emperors, Greek generals following Alexander, Central Asian nomads, and Indian dynasties all left their mark here. This wasn't a clash of cultures, it was a conversation. You could walk its streets and hear debates in Sanskrit, Pali, Greek, and Persian. See artisans blending Hellenistic realism with Indian spirituality to create the first ever statues of the Buddha, and smell the incense from Zoroastrian fire altars mixing with the scent of sandalwood from Buddhist monasteries. This unique fusion made Taxila a magnetic center for learning. It wasn't a single campus, but a sprawling network of monastic universities and individual teachers' schools. Renowned scholars like Panini, the father of Sanskrit grammar, taught here. The great physician Charoka, who authored foundational texts on Ayurvedic medicine, is said to have studied within its precincts. Students from across Asia would travel for months to sit at the feet of masters, studying not just Buddhist philosophy and scripture, but also medicine, astronomy, logic, mathematics, and military science. The city's layout reflected this scholarly purpose. Instead of a fortified citadel, the dominant structures were viharas, residential colleges for monks, and stupas, hemispherical mounds containing sacred relics. The Dharmarajika stupa, one of the largest, was believed to house ashes of the Buddha himself. Pilgrims would circle these stupas in meditation, their circumambulation a physical prayer. The monasteries were designed for contemplation, with quiet courtyards, individual cells for study, and assembly halls for debate. The sacredness of Taxila was in its atmosphere, an air thick with inquiry and reverence. To learn here was to engage in a sacred act. Knowledge was not separate from the path to nirvana, it was a vehicle for it. Understanding medicine was compassion in action. Mastering logic was a tool to cut through illusion. The city's very existence was a testament to the Buddhist ideal that wisdom, freely shared, was the true foundation for a harmonious world. This made the ground sacred in a profoundly different way. It wasn't a thin place where gods descended, but a fertile plain where human minds could ascend, where the seeds of the Buddha's teachings were planted, cross-pollinated with other great traditions, and cultivated into a forest of wisdom that sheltered all who sought it. The ruins of its lecture halls and silent stupas speak of a sanctuary built not from fear of the divine, but from a boundless faith in the human potential to understand. Capon's beauty is a language carved in stone. Nestled in a fertile valley of western Honduras, this city earned its title as the Athens of the Maya world not through conquest, but through an extraordinary devotion to art, science, and the written word. Here, the sacred was not just felt, it was meticulously recorded, turning the entire urban landscape into a living library of history and belief. The heart of this intellectual and spiritual project is a monumental staircase. The hieroglyphic stairway is a masterpiece of Maya scholarship, a cascade of over 2,000 glyphs carved into 63 steps, forming the longest known inscription in the ancient Maya world. It is not a random collection of symbols, it is a deliberate, continuous narrative. Each step is a sentence, each riser a chapter, telling the dynastic history of Kapon's kings, their wars, their rituals, their divine right to rule. To climb it was to literally walk up through time, absorbing the sacred chronicle of the city with every step. This was history as a sacred act, the preservation of the royal lineage being essential to maintaining the cosmic order. The stairway was more than a monument. It was a permanent public assertion that the present king was the culmination of all who came before, his authority etched into the very bones of the city. Those bones are a complex, layered puzzle. The Acropolis of Kapon is not a single structure, but a dense, almost organic cluster of pyramids, temples, and plazas built over 4 centuries. Each new ruler would often build his own temple over or adjacent to that of his predecessor, encasing the old sacred space within the new. This created a vertical timeline, a physical stratification of power and piety. Archaeologists digging through these layers have uncovered magnificent earlier temples like the famous Rosalilla structure, found almost perfectly preserved inside a later pyramid. Its stucco facade still painted a brilliant red with elaborate masks of the mountain and sun gods. Each layer was not a replacement but an envelopment, a way of honoring and containing the sacred power of the past while projecting new authority into the future. The city's spiritual life pulsed in its central plaza, dominated by the sacred ball court. But this was not merely a stadium for sport. The ball game at Kapon was a profound cosmological drama. The court itself represented the night sky, a portal to the underworld. The heavy rubber ball symbolized the sun, moon, or Venus, and its movement back and forth between the teams mirrored the perilous journey of these celestial bodies through the heavens and the underworld. The stone markers set into the sloping walls were not just goals, they were stars or constellations. The outcome of the game held cosmic stakes, believed to influence the cycles of nature and the favor of the gods. It was a ritual of life, death, and rebirth performed by athletes who were likely nobles or even the king himself, their struggle on the court reenacting the primordial battles of creation. This sacred performance was overseen by rulers who were far more than political leaders. Kapon's kings were depicted as divine beings, often shown in sculptures and stelae wearing the attributes of gods. They wore headdresses of the maize god, symbolizing their role as the source of fertility and life. They stood atop mountain monsters, representing their power as sacred mountains themselves, the axis mundi of their realm. They communicated with ancestors who were believed to reside in the surrounding hills, acting as intermediaries between the living community and the spiritual world. This connection is made permanent in the city's countless altars and stelae. These are not just statues, they are chapters. Altar Q, perhaps the most famous, shows all 16 kings of Kapon's dynasty seated in a circle, passing the scepter of power from the founder, Kinish Yakskuk Mo, to the last great king, Yaks Passage. It is a stone council of ancestors, a visual contract of unbroken, divine succession. Every sculpture, every altar, every glyph was part of a continuous story, a narrative woven into the city's fabric that explained why the world was ordered as it was, and why the king's sacred duty was to maintain that order through ritual, astronomy, and reverence for the past. At Kapon, the ground was sacred because it was the stage for this never-ending story, a story written in stairways, played out in ball courts, and presided over by kings who were both historians and gods, forever watching over their stone testament to time. The stone libraries of Kapon recorded a world of divine kings, but another empire built its power upon a different kind of contract. High on the windswept plateau of central Turkey, surrounded by deep gorges and rolling hills, lies Hattusa. This was the capital of the Hittites, a Bronze Age superpower that rivaled Egypt and Babylon, and its entire identity was forged in the belief that the gods were not just honored guests but active partners in the business of state. The Hittites did not worship a handful of deities, they served a pantheon of thousands, a vast bureaucratic heaven that mirrored their own complex empire. Every mountain, every spring, every storm was personified, each requiring its own rituals and respect. To rule from Hattusa was to administer this divine coalition. The city's sacred center was not a single towering pyramid but a landscape. Just over a mile from the main gates, a natural rock outcrop opens into two secluded chambers. This is Yazilikaya, the inscribed rock. It feels less like a temple and more like a hidden council chamber for the gods. The smooth limestone walls are carved with two magnificent processions. 63 deities, men and women, march toward each other. On one wall, the male gods, wearing conical hats and carrying curved swords, stride with purpose. On the other, the goddesses proceed in long robes, many standing atop symbolic animals. They all converge on a central scene where the supreme storm god, Teshub, meets the earth goddess, Hepat. This open-air gallery was the ultimate axis mundi, the very spot where the Hittite pantheon was believed to gather. Scholars think Yazilikaya was used during the most important festival of the year, the New Year celebration. The king and his court would process here, and in this natural sanctuary they would perform rituals that re-established the cosmos, reaffirming the bond between the ruler and the divine assembly that legitimized his rule. The gods were not abstract, they were participants, their stone images serving as permanent witnesses to the ceremonies that sustain the world. This idea that the divine was a direct witness extended from the sanctuary to the very laws of the empire. Hittite treaties carved into clay tablets did not just list terms and signatures, they invoked the gods as enforcers. A treaty with a rival king would call upon the 1,000 gods of Hattusa to bear witness, and it would detail horrific curses for the one who broke the oath, punishments to be delivered by those same deities. The ground of the city was therefore sacred because it was the administrative headquarters of this celestial government. Even the city's formidable defenses were theological statements. Hattusa was protected by miles of monumental walls, and its gates were guarded not by soldiers but by stone deities. The most famous is the Lion Gate, where two massive, powerfully rendered lions stare out from the masonry, their bodies emerging from the stone. They were not mere decorations, they were apotropaic guardians, their spiritual power woven into the fortifications to repel evil and enemy alike. Another gate features a carving of a warrior god, likely the protective deity Sharuma. Passing through these portals, you left the profane world and entered a domain under direct divine protection. The city itself was a sacred vessel, and its walls were a ritual boundary as much as a military one. So Hattusa presents a unique vision. Here, sacred ground was not a passive location blessed by the gods, it was an active diplomatic seat. The king was the high priest, negotiating with a parliament of deities whose favor was as crucial as any army or grain silo. The treaties were prayers, the walls were hymns, and the rock sanctuary was the conference room where heaven and earth renewed their eternal, binding contract. The sacred diplomacy of Hattusa was a contract carved in stone, but on the island of Sri Lanka, a different kind of covenant took root, one grown from a single living branch. Anuradhapura was not merely a capital city, it was a promise made permanent, a paradise engineered on earth to protect and nurture the most sacred object in the Buddhist world. For over a millennium, it served as the royal and spiritual heart of the Sinhalese kingdom, becoming one of the most enduring and influential cities of the ancient world. Its foundation story is a pilgrimage in itself. In the 3rd century before the Common Era, a cutting was taken from the very Bodhi tree in India under which the Buddha attained enlightenment. This living sapling, a direct descendant of the Tree of Awakening, was carried with immense reverence to Sri Lanka by Sanghamitra, the daughter of the great Indian Emperor Ashoka. It was planted in the royal precincts of Anuradhapura with royal ceremony. That tree, known today as the Jaya Sri Mahabodhi, still grows on the very spot where it was planted over 2,300 years ago, making it the oldest living human-planted tree in the world with a known planting date. This was not just a symbol, it was the axis mundi of the entire city and kingdom. The ground around it was instantly, irrevocably sanctified. The presence of the Bodhi tree meant the Buddha's enlightenment was not a distant historical event, but a living, breathing reality in their midst. The city that grew around this sacred heart was designed as a perfect Buddhist universe. Its skyline was dominated not by palaces or fortresses, but by stupas known locally as dagobas. These massive, bell-shaped structures are not tombs, they are reliquaries. Built of brick and plastered a brilliant white, they were designed to hold precious relics, often believed to be bodily remains or objects associated with the Buddha himself. The most magnificent of these is the Ruwanwelisaya. When it was completed in the 2nd century before the Common Era, it was one of the largest monuments in the world, a perfect hemisphere of white that seemed to mirror the dome of the sky. To circumambulate its vast base, to feel its serene, overwhelming presence, was to participate in a walking meditation. The stupa's shape is deeply symbolic. The solid dome represents the world mountain at the center of the Buddhist cosmos, while the spire on top signifies the axis that connects the earthly realm to the heavens. Each stupa was a permanent meditation aid, a focal point for the entire community's devotion. But Anuradhapura was more than a collection of monuments. It was a complete, self-sustaining sacred ecosystem. The city's planners were master hydraulic engineers. They constructed a sophisticated network of massive artificial reservoirs called tanks, like the vast Tissa Wiwa and the even larger Nuwara Wiwa. These were not merely pragmatic water supplies for a dense urban population. In the symbolic language of the city, they were the oceans surrounding the world mountain. The shimmering blue water reflected the white stupas and the green of the Bodhi tree, creating a landscape of breathtaking serenity that mirrored the pure lands described in Buddhist texts. The reservoirs fed intricate canals that watered vast monastic gardens and rice paddies, ensuring that the thousands of monks and nuns, as well as the lay population, were provided for without want. This material self-sufficiency was essential for spiritual practice. The city's sprawling monastic complexes, like the Abhayagiri and Jetavana, were universities in the forest. They housed thousands of residents who dedicated their lives to study, meditation, and the preservation of the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings. In quiet scriptoriums, monks meticulously copied sacred texts onto ola palm leaves. In debate halls, philosophical subtleties were examined. The entire city functioned as a single, vast monastery, a machine for generating and preserving enlightenment. Pilgrims would journey for weeks to enter this paradise. Their pilgrimage would follow a sacred geography, starting with offerings at the ancient Bodhi tree, then proceeding to venerate the relics in the great stupas, and finally visiting the cave monasteries where enlightened teachers lived. The rhythm of life was set by the chants from the monasteries and the silent, mindful circuits around the monuments. Anuradhapura demonstrated a profound belief that the sacred could be cultivated. It was not enough to find a holy place, you had to build an entire world around it, a world of water, brick, and disciplined thought, all designed to protect a single, living tree and the truth it represented. This was a city built not for power or trade, but as a permanent sanctuary for awakening itself, a belief that with enough care, a paradise of peace could be made to last for 1,000 years. That living paradise of Anuradhapura was a sanctuary of water and wisdom, but the desert, too, can hold an oasis of the mind. On the southern fringe of the vast Sahara, where golden dunes meet the dusty plains, a name echoes with the weight of legend. Timbuktu, for centuries in the Western imagination, it was a mythical place, a synonym for the farthest, most unreachable corner of the earth. But the truth of Timbuktu is far more profound than any fable. This was not a city of gold, but of paper and ink. It was a radiant beacon of faith and intellect, a sacred center built not on the wealth of trade, but on the relentless, holy pursuit of knowledge. Its fame began with commerce, certainly. Situated at a crucial crossroads, Timbuktu was where the camel caravans from the north, laden with salt and Mediterranean goods, met the traders from the south, bringing gold, ivory, and kola nuts. This exchange made it wealthy, but that wealth was poured into a higher purpose. From the 15th to the 17th centuries, under the Songhai and earlier Mali empires, Timbuktu transformed into one of the Islamic world's greatest centers of learning. It became known as the City of 333 Saints, a title referring to the pious scholars and holy men buried within its precincts, whose spiritual presence was believed to sanctify the very ground. The heart of this intellectual revolution was Sankore University. This was not a single, centralized campus as we think of today, but a constellation of independent schools, each centered on the home of a master teacher. Imagine a city where the most prestigious addresses were not palaces but libraries. A renowned scholar would teach in the courtyard of his house, students sitting in the sand under the shade of awnings, debating points of law and theology. The curriculum was rigorous and vast, encompassing Islamic jurisprudence, grammar, rhetoric, logic, astronomy, medicine, and mathematics. Students came from across Africa and beyond, drawn by the reputation of Timbuktu's teachers, some spending decades in study before earning their license to teach, a certificate written on a wooden board. This sacred knowledge was meticulously preserved in manuscripts. In private libraries, families guarded collections that spanned generations, hundreds of thousands of handwritten pages bound in leather. These were not just religious texts, they included scientific treatises on astronomy with detailed star charts, medical manuals describing surgical procedures and herbal remedies, legal commentaries that shaped societies, and poetic works of stunning beauty. The ink, often made from local gallnuts, was mixed with devotion. The paper, sometimes imported across the desert, was more precious than silk. To copy a manuscript was an act of worship, a way of preserving divine truth and human understanding for the future. The city itself became a living library, its sacredness measured in the depth of its shelves. This scholarly soul found its architectural expression in the city's great mosques, most famously the Jingraba Mosque. Commissioned in the 14th century by the wealthy Emperor Mansa Musa, its construction is a marvel of sacred engineering from local materials. Built entirely from earth, wood, and straw, its structure is perfectly adapted to the harsh desert climate. The thick mud brick walls provide insulation from the searing heat. The protruding wooden beams, called toron, serve as permanent scaffolding for the annual repairs after the rainy season, but they also create a striking, rhythmic pattern across the facades, a visual heartbeat. The minaret, a towering pinnacle of mud brick, rises not just as a call to prayer, but as a defiant statement, a mountain of faith sculpted from the very earth of the Sahara. To stand inside its cool, dimly lit courtyard, with rows of palm wood columns holding up the roof, is to feel a profound humility. This is a sanctuary built from the dust, a testament to the belief that the divine could be honored with the simplest, most immediate elements of the land. Timbuktu's sacred ground, therefore, was not a site of miraculous springs or ancient tombs of mythical founders. Its holiness was cultivated page by page, lesson by lesson, brick by brick. It was a sacredness of the intellect, a conviction that to seek knowledge was to draw closer to God, and that preserving that knowledge was a duty as solemn as any prayer. The city stood as a radiant argument against ignorance, a proof that even at the edge of a vast, empty desert, the human spirit could build a metropolis of the mind, a beacon whose light, carried on camelback and whispered in scholarly debates, would illuminate the world for centuries. Across 35 cities and 11,000 years, a single thread connects the stone circles of Göbekli Tepe to the manuscript libraries of Timbuktu. From the very beginning, the human desire to build something permanent was inseparable from the need to touch something sacred. These were not random settlements on convenient ground. They were deliberate acts of cosmic architecture, each one an attempt to draw a map of heaven on the canvas of earth, to anchor the fleeting human story to the eternal rhythms of the gods, the stars, and the seasons. The stones themselves are the oldest storytellers. They tell of kings who were not just rulers but living mountains, of temples that were not just buildings but stairways to the stars. They whisper of communities who believed their survival depended not on armies alone, but on the precise alignment of a doorway to catch the solstice sun, or on the faithful performance of a ritual that convinced the rain to fall. These cities show us that before we had nations, we had sanctuaries. Before we wrote laws, we traced sacred boundaries. The shared belief in a holy center was the original social glue, the force that could compel thousands to move 10-ton stones or to carve a paradise from a cliff face. This journey reveals a fundamental truth about our species. We are not just toolmakers or storytellers, we are meaning makers. We look at a bare hill, a winding river, or a crack in the earth, and we see a potential gateway. We feel a pull to mark that spot, to build upon it, to declare, here, this is where the world makes sense. Here is where we meet the divine. Whether it is the engineered harmony of Mohenjo-Daro's grid, the terrifying cosmic balance of Tenochtitlan's twin temples, or the quiet scholarly devotion of Taxila's courtyards, every one of these cities is a testament to that profound, enduring impulse. So we are left with a question, not for the past, but for ourselves. Among these 35 sacred sites, from the living Bodhi tree of Anuradhapura to the silent, solar-aligned stones of Cahokia, which one captures your imagination most deeply? Which story of faith etched in stone, water, or earth resonates with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey to the crossroads of belief and architecture, be sure to subscribe. Our exploration of history's greatest mysteries